After getting rid of a yokai on Busaman with a concert-like performance, the gang gains two new friends, Rin Sawaki, the class rep, and Rin's childhood friend, Mai Kawabanga, now a yokai. The two join the gang as they pursue a lead regarding Okarun's remaining family jewel. This brings them to an unexpected place, in an unexpected way, reminiscent of an old scenario you probably saw in a past movie.
Where's Mom?
Expect another roller coaster of adventure and emotions as this arc is the final one to close out the manga's first saga. Let's get started. That night, they returned to the ISA household. Before eating, Rin thanked them for their help. However, as painful as it was for her to say, she believed her friend hadn't moved on to the afterlife. A small spirit was perched on her head, wearing a turtle-shaped hat with a ribbon, and it was Mai. She commented that the place was squalid. Momo remarked that she had become something weird. While the two were talking, everyone else was busy eating, including those who had pulled the parade float. Seiko announced that once they finished eating, they should leave. She praised them for their good work, and the Hayashi performers responded with a yes, ma'am. After dinner, they asked if it was okay that Mai hadn't gone to the afterlife. Seiko replied that it was fine. Mai was no longer an evil spirit, but more like a guardian spirit now. ISA was pleased with this. Meanwhile, Okarun was curious if this meant Mai hadn't found peace. Mai responded, asking how that could happen. She couldn't leave until she saw her friend become an idol, but Rin said that wasn't her goal anymore. Mai disagreed and said she cannot allow that, insisting that Rin had a talent for singing and needed to sing. Otherwise, her life would be meaningless. ISA commented that this was too harsh. Mai added that Rin shouldn't mingle with ordinary people like them, and so ISA became angry upon hearing this. Rin revealed she had a new dream now. While she still enjoyed singing, becoming an idol was now impossible for her. Mai was curious about this new dream, but Rin was reluctant to share it. Since she doesn't want to say it, Mai insisted idol it is. Annoyed, Rin said Mai shouldn't make decisions for her. Mai pressed Rin to reveal her new dream. Embarrassed, Rin admitted she wanted to write light novels. Momo approached Okarun and poked him, while Mai said Rin had nothing to write about. She warned Rin not to assume light novels were easy to write. Rin retorted that Mai shouldn't assume being an idol was easy either, adding that someone like her couldn't do it. Rin then shared that she wanted to write a romance story about a vampire and a girl. Embarrassed by her admission, she blushed. But Mai said if Rin was embarrassed by that, it would never happen. She told Rin to be a good girl and focus on being an idol instead. Momo, annoyed with Okarun beside her, said if they were done, they should leave because she was tired and needed sleep. Okarun interjected, saying he had something to tell her. He revealed that the class representative had found his family jewel. Momo was shocked by this and said they should have told her immediately. She asked if Okarun had retrieved it, but he replied that it wasn't there because Rin had left it at the police box. However, it seemed someone had taken it. Momo couldn't believe this and asked how they had proven the item belonged to them. Okarun was also puzzled and thought it might still be in the police box. If so, it meant the police had lied to them. Okarun suggested that Momo could see its aura to confirm if it was there or not. She stood up and said she could do that. They agreed to check tomorrow after school, and so Okarun said he'd leave now. Meanwhile, Rin admitted she had misjudged Momo and apologized. She had assumed Momo was a scary delinquent, but in reality, she was very kind and considerate. Momo, embarrassed, told her to stop praising her and leave. Momo saw them off at the gate and told Okarun to escort Rin to her front door. Okarun agreed. Momo seemed a bit gloomy and turned to go back, but Okarun called out to her. He had almost forgotten to say see you tomorrow. Momo returned the sentiment, and they both blushed. Okarun ran out while Momo stood still, watching him leave. As they left, she then walked inside and went upstairs to rest. Back in her room, Momo thought about what Okarun had said. Lying in bed, she was still blushing, unable to believe that Okarun had looked her in the eye, something he didn't normally do. The next day, Okarun was holding his glasses when Momo clung onto him, asking what has gotten into him. He couldn't look at her again, saying she was too close. When Momo pointed out that Okarun always avoided eye contact even from a distance, he denied it. So Momo challenged him to a 10-second staring contest. Akaran refused, saying it wasn't necessary. Annoyed, Momo said there would be a penalty if he couldn't do it. Akaran kept denying and saying he didn't know what she was talking about. Momo gave the signal to start their staring contest, but Akaran noticed they had arrived at the police box. Momo was irritated that he was trying to change the subject. She said they'd come back to this later. Akaran agreed and suggested they check the police box. Outside, Momo focused and closed her eyes. She looked at the police box's aura. Akaran asked if his family jewel was there, but she couldn't answer yet. She wondered if it was orb artifacts. Momo said she couldn't see it because his family jewels were extremely bright and blingy. This meant someone had indeed taken it. Momo was scared and wondered who it could be. Akaran didn't know either, but the question now was how to find that person. Momo asked if people who take lost items or property don't write down their information first. Akaran agreed, saying the police might have taken the person's name and address. So the problem now was how to access that information. Back at Momo's house, Turbo Granny couldn't believe what the two were asking. She questioned why she needed to pretend to be lost property. Momo and Akaran were on their knees, pleading with her, explaining how crucial this role was. They said she was the only one they could turn to. She would just have to pretend to be lost property and slip into the police box. Afterward, she would take notes on all the lost property data from the previous month. They described it as an undercover operation that could rival even Spy Family. The two begged, saying they really needed her help. While lying down, Turbo Granny responded that, as she had said before, when asking someone for a favor, they should show a sign of good faith. Momo then produced 2 family-size packages of super hard chipple garlic flavor chips, while Akaran brought out what looked like a stuffed toy with a tag reading bowl, Nobility. Turbo Granny peeked at the offerings and lay back down, commenting not bad. With that, their mission was set in motion, and they took Turbo Granny to the police box. Upon arriving at the Camago Police Department, Momo and Akaran surrendered Turbo Granny, claiming they had found this lost property. Akaran explained that they had brought it to hand over to the police. The officer looked at them seriously and pulled out a drawer to retrieve a form. Momo carefully observed his every move. The officer handed them the form and a pen, instructing them to fill it out. Momo placed Turbo Granny on the desk and complied. The officer then examined Turbo Granny and asked where they had found it. Akaran reluctantly replied that it was at the shopping strip. When asked for a more specific location, Akaran hesitated. While writing, Momo signaled for him to say arcade, and so Okaroon said they found it at a video game arcade. The curious officer questioned why they hadn't just left it at the arcade. Akaran struggled to respond, so Momo intervened, saying they had heard that part-timers at the arcade often stole from the lost and found. That's why they decided to bring it to the police box. The officer inquired about which arcade, and Momo repeated that it's at the shopping strip. The officer pressed further, asking which of the 3 arcades in the shopping strip. Meanwhile, Akaran was sweating nervously. Momo pondered which one they meant. The officer wondered aloud if claw machines still had Moneki Nico figurines these days. Momo agreed, and Akaran nodded in confirmation. Turbo Granny, annoyed, thought to herself about how much longer she'd have to pretend to be a figurine. The officer added that he often patrolled the arcades, but had never seen such a thing there. Momo suggested it might have been in the back, but the officer countered that the back was all video games now. He asked again if the arcade they mentioned was indeed in the shopping strip. Momo hesitated, finding it difficult to answer promptly. The officer then turned his attention to Akaran, reminding him that he had been there before to retrieve lost property. He began to question if this was truly a lost item, wondering if they had planted a camera. Akaran denied this while Momo seemed to be doing something. Suddenly, there was a loud noise from inside. The officer turned to look. Momo commented that something must have fallen because of the loud noise. Meanwhile, Turbo Granny moved slightly in annoyance while the officer's back was turned. Akaran realized Momo had created the noise to distract the officer. As the officer checked the back, Turbo Granny fidgeted on the table. Momo whispered for her to endure it a little longer, but Turbo Granny was extremely irritated. When the officer turned back, Momo announced she had finished filling out the form. The two hurriedly thanked him and tried to leave, but the officer stopped them, making them nervous. He handed them the document and asked if they wanted a reward. Akaran scratched his head, questioning if that was necessary. They declined and ran out. Outside the police box, Momo wondered what was up with that officer, finding him terrifying. Once they were far enough away, Momo said they had finally managed to get Turbo Granny inside. However, she was concerned about whether Turbo Granny would be okay. Akaran shared the same worry. Anyway, they concluded that all they could do now was trust and wait. That night, the police officer patrolled and left a sign outside the police box. Inside, Turbo Granny was wrapped in plastic and placed on a shelf with other lost items. She grumbled that it wasn't worth it for the Chipples. She struggled to escape from the plastic wrap, then tossed it aside. Noticing many umbrellas nearby, she took one and used it to climb down. She tumbled down and began to spy inside the police box. Before leaving the storage area, she peeked to ensure no one was around. Finding it empty, she searched the cabinets and shelves for information. She paused upon noticing a computer and monitors in the room. She climbed onto the table and tried to access the computer. However, it required a password to sign in, frustrating her. Because of this, Turbo Granny left and went to find Akaran and Momo. She told them it made no sense. Momo was shocked to see her suddenly out. Turbo Granny admitted she couldn't handle computer things and suggested they give it up. Momo asked if she had looked around inside, mentioning there might be documents and files. Turbo Granny replied that maybe, but she had done her best. As they walked, Momo asked for the hard Chipples back, but Turbo Granny claimed her mission was complete. Meanwhile, Akaran pointed out that if she left, it meant a lost item was missing from the police box, so they needed to leave something in her place. Momo was irritated, complaining about Akaran's family jewel and now this. She suggested going to a convenience store, thinking something with a cat toy freebie might suffice. Akaran told Turbo Granny to wait outside, but she requested juice, annoying Momo. To their shock, they were greeted by a Serpo. Akaran couldn't believe it, and the Serpo just said good evening. Momo asked what Rokuro was doing there. He explained he was working part-time and told them to come another day if they needed anything. Irritated, Momo pointed at him, saying she didn't know what he was planning, but she knew they were up to no good. Rokuro replied that because of her, he had become a defective product and couldn't return to them. Curious, Momo asked what he meant. She wondered if the Serpos were snubbing him. Rokuro didn't understand the term, so Momo clarified, asking if he'd been cast out. He confirmed this. When Momo asked why, Rokuro explained they were clones, required to think alike. However, his thinking had changed because of her. Momo apologized, but he didn't accept it. Akaran interjected, saying they couldn't trust the Serpo and was sure he was planning something. Momo then asked Rokuro how much he could shape his nanoskin, mentioning they had a favor to ask of him. It seems they had come to an agreement when Okarun and Momo emerged, accompanied by Rokuro. He thanked the person who had replaced him at work. Momo hurried him, saying they should leave before the police returned from patrol. While running, Rokuro mentioned how fortunate it was that a part-timer could cover for him on such short notice. He wondered what they would have done without a replacement, saying he might have lost his job. Rokuro asked Momo if she would take responsibility if he lost his job, but Momo told him to shut up and reminded him that he owed her. She added that if he were to lose his convenience store job, she knew of another place he could work. Rokuro was pleased to hear this. They arrived at the police box just in time. Momo peeked inside to see if the police had returned, but he hadn't. So, Momo made a request to Rokuro and thanked him. But he asked first what kind of job she was referring to, saying he'd like a salary of more than 1,000 yen per hour. Using nanoskin technology, Rokuro then transformed into a police officer. Momo wondered if he could change his face as well, but he replied that he doesn't have enough nanoskin to do that. With no other choice, Momo agreed and let him enter. Rokuro commented on her tendency to complain. Momo told him to find out who had taken the family jewel, but Rokuro asked her to first tell him the hourly wage she had mentioned. However, Momo didn't provide any information. Instead, she told him to leave the cat inside. So, Rokuro entered the empty police box. He looked around and examined the lost property on display. He pulled a box with a cat figure from his pocket. This was what Momo had referred to when she told him to leave it, as replacement to Turbo Granny. After placing it there, Rokuro went to the computer area. He noticed the computer's CPU, and suddenly his hand transformed into a USB drive, which he inserted into it. The computer requested sign-in details, such as username and password, but Rokuro managed to find this information, automatically entering the required details. Impressively, it was confirmed, allowing him to locate the lost property data folder. Outside, Momo was restless. While Okarun wondered where Turbo Granny had gone, Momo replied that she had gone home. Suddenly, Okarun pointed something out to her, and Momo was startled to see the police officer cycling back. She stood up, unable to believe it. They needed to buy more time, and so they pondered what to do. As the officer approached, the two blocked his way. The officer had a serious expression while Momo and Okarun argued in front of him. The officer dismounted from his bike and asked what they were doing there so late at night. Okarun repeatedly called Momo a dummy, and she asked if that was the best he could do. She told him to mix up his insults. Momo whispered that he should badmouth her even worse, or else it wouldn't look like they were really fighting. Okarun said that was easier said than done, as he couldn't improvise insults. The two stepped on each other's feet, causing them to fall onto the road, with Momo landing on top of Okarun. They blushed at the situation. Momo profusely apologized as she moved away from him. Meanwhile, the officer just passed by them, telling them to go home or he'd be forced to call their parents. As they stood up, Momo asked if Okarun was hurt, and he replied he was fine. He returned the question, and Momo gave the same answer. Despite the awkward situation, they remembered their mission and told each other to forget about it. They tried to stop the officer, but it was too late. He caught Rokuro coming out of the door, making Okarun and Momo extremely nervous. The two stared at each other when suddenly Rokuro punched the officer, calling him a thief. Both Momo and Okarun couldn't believe what was happening. The officer caught Rokuro's hand and punched him in the face. He said he wouldn't recommend fighting a police officer because he wouldn't win. Rokuro wouldn't give up, so he counterattacked and asked about the officer's hourly wage. While they were fighting, the officer replied that his salary was low. Momo held her head in disbelief at what was happening. Okarun was curious about what the Serpo thought he was doing. He wondered what they should do, and if he should stop the two of them. Rokuro introduced himself as being from the Kamigo Station exit police box, and his name was Tanaka. The officer couldn't believe him, but he explained that he came to inspect some lost property file there. He said he tried to call, but the officer was on patrol, and once he arrived, the one and only Bega the demon appeared. And because he practiced martial arts, he couldn't help but start about. Momo was sweating nervously because of all the things he was saying. She was sure that because of his lies, they would be exposed immediately. The police officer then took out his phone and made a call. He introduced himself as Bega from the Kamigo police box. He thanked the person who answered and began asking questions. He said that a Mr. Tanaka from their police box was there, claiming he had come to check the lost property data. The officer repeatedly answered yes to the person on the phone while staring seriously at the Serpo. Meanwhile, Momo and Okarun were going crazy over the situation. The officer thanked the person he was speaking to and said he understood, while Rokuro maintained a martial arts pose. The officer stared at him, as well as at Momo and Okarun. He mentioned that he had received confirmation, so he led the sergeant inside to check the lost property data. Momo and Okarun couldn't believe what had happened. As they walked, Bega added that the next time he wanted a match, he should do it in the station dojo. After the incident, Momo spoke to Rokuro and asked how he had managed to do all that. He replied that he had hijacked the officer's phone. He had sent nanoskin from his hat to the ground and connected it to the phone. In reality, he was the one talking to the officer. Okarun asked how he knew about the other police box and other details about the officer. Rokuro said he had seen it on the computer. Okarun was shocked that he had managed to do that in such a short time. Momo insisted that he should never do that to them. Moreover, Rokuro said that the person who took the family jewel was not far from their school. He added that the name of the person who took it was Unjizuma, and he was a student like them. He attended Renjaka High School, a place where the students seemed to be delinquents. At that school, a group of tough boys called out to those facing them as eggheads. They told them to accept their fate and to submit to their class. But the other class didn't back down. And because of this, the two groups started brawling. One used a wooden pallet as a shield, while others grabbed ladders, drums, ropes, and various items to charge. This was the scene Momo and Okarun encountered when they visited the school. Momo couldn't believe they were in the middle of a turf war, while Okarun suggested they forget their agenda for today. However, someone called for their attention. One asked if Momo was lost. Another commented that she looked sweet, and it was okay if she wanted to spend time with him. He offered to give her a tour of their school. Because of this, Okarun stepped in front of her, visibly nervous. Momo apologized to them and said they were looking for Onii-Zuma. She asked if anyone knew him, but one of them touched her hair, curious about how she dyed it. Okarun became concerned when he saw this, so he pushed the guy away and told him to stop. He said not to touch Momo, which surprised the others. The boy grabbed Okarun, saying he was brave to touch him. Okarun apologized profusely. Another approached and asked if he wanted to get beaten up. Momo stopped them all, while Okarun said they didn't come there to fight. Momo explained that they just wanted to ask Onii-Zuma something. One of them replied that there'll be no more talking until he kicked Okarun's ass since he attacked him first. Okarun touched his glasses and agreed. He said they could beat him up, but they should never touch Momo. Momo said he didn't need to do that. She responded that technically, the guy was the first to touch her hair, calling him a creep. So, for the third time, she demanded they bring out Onii-Zuma. A giant-like student emerged, surprising them. He was incredibly large, and Okarun wondered if he was Zuma. The giant said he should apologize now. Momo was confused about why she should apologize when the other guy should be the one apologizing. However, the giant grabbed the boy's head and said he couldn't just touch a girl's hair like that. The boy apologized, but the giant said he shouldn't be apologizing to him. So, the boy bowed and apologized to Momo. Momo accepted the apology while Okarun also bowed and apologized in return. The giant said they don't tolerate dudes who make girls sad. That's their stance. As they could see, they were in the middle of a dispute. Class B was up next, and they had a murderous rage going on. So, he apologized for their unpleasant experience there. Momo replied that it wasn't a track meet. The big man said the boy they were looking for was in grade 10, Class D. He pointed to a group nearby and said they were Class D, to which Momo commented that this wasn't a spectator sport. Clearly annoyed, Momo asked if they are even capable of understanding. The man suggested that if it was okay with her, they would accompany them. Momo was pleased with the offer and agreed. So, the giant and his classmates approached and confronted the Class D group. The two groups started posturing, causing Momo and Okarun to fall silent. The big student from Class D said how was he supposed to know where Onii-Zuma was? And even if he knew, he doubted they would tell them. Momo was surprised to learn that this wasn't Zuma. The other responded that he was the number 3 of Class D, Toriyumi. The bald one got annoyed at being called number 3. Again, he was asked where Zuma was, but Toriyumi said he didn't know. He hadn't seen him for about 2 weeks. Besides, Zuma rarely attended school anyway, so he was probably just wandering around somewhere. He added that he didn't want to associate with Zuma anymore because of the strange things he had been doing lately. Okarun and Momo were shocked when he said he got creeped out by Zuma, as if he had been possessed. Previously, Toriyumi said Zuma was extremely tough in fights. He could even say Zuma was the toughest in their grade. But lately, he seemed deadly in a different way. He was like a demon, not human anymore. Momo asked if he had seen Zuma with a gold ball since he was there 2 weeks ago. Toriyumi confirmed this. Finally, they were on the right track. Momo asked if Zuma had mentioned anything about that object. Toriyumi said Zuma only stated that now that he had it, he can wreck the world. So, Toriyumi believed Zuma had gone crazy. Momo and Okarun exchanged glances. Momo asked Okarun if he could transform now, which surprised him. But Momo insisted it should be done immediately. So, Okarun took off his shoes and gradually transformed using Turbo Granny's powers. Momo addressed Toriyumi again, asking if he noticed anything. Toriyumi was shocked by what he saw, and Momo confirmed if he could sense the supernatural. Toriyumi couldn't believe it and said they were the same as Zuma. Momo was puzzled and asked if they had the same form as Okarun. Toriumi backed away, telling them to stop and calling them monsters. His companions were confused about why he was so frightened and asked what the problem was. Momo repeatedly asked Toriumi if Zuma was like this too, and if he had touched the golden balls. However, Toriumi was overwhelmed and disgusted, then ran away. The other students laughed, saying his behavior didn't make sense. Meanwhile, Okarun and Momo seem to have found a lead in their search for Okarun's family jewel. We then see an old house, seemingly abandoned, as the place is messy. Momo and Okarun went there to search for Zuma. However, there was no one there. Momo said she also tried to sense an aura there, but there was nothing at all. So, they had no clue where to find him anymore. Momo was very frustrated, wondering where Zuma had gone. Meanwhile, Okarun couldn't believe that Zuma was like them, but he reportedly said he would destroy the world. Momo asked what they would do if he was like the evil eye. Okarun suddenly heard something strange and asked Momo if she noticed that sound too. She listened carefully and said it sounded like screaming. Okarun added that the sound was getting closer and closer. So Momo became worried and curious about where it was coming from. Okarun couldn't identify it, but he had a bad feeling about it. Just then, an old man, wearing only briefs and sando, came running towards the two of them, which startled them greatly. They started running because they thought he was a pervert with a sword. While Okarun was taking off his shoes, he told Momo to stop the man for a moment. So, using her giant hand ability, she halted him. The man was terrified, calling her a monster. Momo then told Okarun that she would handle it and that he should call the police. However, the man slashed at her giant hand with his sword, causing Momo difficulty. She was hurt, so Okarun made her step back. Suddenly, they heard another sound, which turned out to be a group of men running in their direction. The old man asked them for help. Momo couldn't believe this was yet another problem. One man from the group charged at the one they called a dirty old man, wielding a piece of wood. However, Momo intervened and stopped him. The group was surprised by this and asked what kind of being she was. Momo was curious about their way of questioning. She also told them to stop swinging the object they were holding, as it was dangerous. Just then, Okarun transformed and shielded Momo. He threatened the group not to come closer to her. They were shocked by his action, and Momo pondered their reaction. The men said he was like Zuma. So, Momo stepped forward and asked if they had mentioned Zuma. She wondered if they were also sensitive and asked if they had been like this all along, or if they had touched the gold ball. The man was surprised to hear her words and asked who she was, but Momo said to answer her question first. She knew they were acquainted with Zuma. The masked men took a stance and demanded that they hand over the old man. They said they didn't care about anything else. They warned that if Momo and Okarun interfered, they wouldn't show any mercy. While crying, the old man said he wouldn't go with them because he was going home. He said he wouldn't return there, especially now that he had managed to escape. However, Momo asked them again if they knew anything about Zuma. She emphasized that she wouldn't give up the old man if they didn't answer her question. However, the group threatened Momo and Okarun not to play games with them, or else they would finish them off. They said it wasn't a negotiation, and they would surely regret it. So, Momo concluded that they indeed knew Zuma. The group didn't respond, just staring at each other. There was an awkward silence. Nevertheless, the masked man eventually gave in and invited them to come along. He admitted that he doesn't hit women on principle, so he apologized to her. But he told her to make sure the old man would follow them. They went straight to an old tenement. Momo and Okarun followed the group, and they could see that people were actually living inside. She noticed some people hanging out in the hallway, sleeping outside. While walking, the old man pleaded with them to promise not to leave him there and to protect him. Momo agreed, but told him to stop holding onto her back. Finally, they reached their destination, but it was just an empty space. So, Momo asked what they were referring to, as this wasn't the deal. But the masked man pointed out that Zuma was inside. A small diorama could be seen sitting on the bench. He revealed that Zuma had gone inside that diorama-like object, and for Zuma to get out, someone needed to take his place. The old man sobbed, seemingly traumatized. He said he would never go back there because he had already experienced that living hell. Momo was shocked by his words, and the masked man said that the old man had been there from the beginning. If he hadn't left, Zuma wouldn't have ended up there. They surrounded them and said that for Zuma to get out, they needed to throw the old man back in. They prepared to execute their plan, but once again, the old man said he wouldn't return to that world, holding his sword. Another masked man replied that he should face reality. He had already been in that diorama. Because of this, Momo stopped them and tried to calm the situation. However, the men said they would take Zuma back, so she shouldn't obstruct them. They demanded that they surrender the old man. Momo looked at the old man and asked him to tell his story, as they might be able to help. Nevertheless, he only replied that he would never go back there. Momo said she understood him and promised that he wouldn't need to return there. So, he began to tell his story. When he was in 4th grade, he was given that diorama as a gift. His father bought it as a birthday present. He was overjoyed and thanked his father. While in their living room, his mother was curious about what it was, as the box was beautiful. The father answered that an acquaintance had sold it cheaply at their antique shop. Apparently, it was already old. It was extremely intricate and beautifully made. It seemed to be love at first sight for him, and he felt something calling him from it. So, when he opened it and marveled at the palace-like interior, he touched it and suddenly blacked out. The next thing he knew, he was wearing a helmet and had been transported to a strange place filled with bizarre creatures. Back in the present, the old man couldn't hold back his tears as he remembered this. Momo became curious about how old he was now, but he couldn't determine that, as many years had passed, and it felt like he had been there forever. From then on, he was just stuck there. He recalled the place full of monsters, so he was always running and hiding. However, there were many sweets, so he managed to survive. Okarun and Momo became curious about the story. The old man added that in the end, he couldn't handle his situation anymore, so he decided to end his life. However, a person suddenly appeared before him. He was overjoyed that after so long, he had seen a person. Because of this, he held her hand. After that, he suddenly returned to the real world. He was extremely happy to be back, and so he went straight to their house, but he had no idea where he was and didn't know how to get back. So, until he could figure things out, Zuma let him stay with them. Momo was shocked when she heard this name. She asked if it meant that he and Zuma had switched places inside, but he replied that it wasn't the case. Zuma had switched places with the woman he pointed to. That was the hand he had held. Again, Momo was confused. So the woman explained that the old man had gone into the diorama first, then her, and then Zuma. When Zuma arrived there, she approached him and begged to be let out. So Zuma took her place. That's why they all owed Zuma a debt of gratitude. The woman added that all the children there had their own sad backstories. For instance, some couldn't attend school or had troubled lives. However, when they went to that place, they enjoyed being together. Nevertheless, that place also had bad people. These bad people forced women to sell themselves or sell nasty drugs. But Zuma and his group protected them from such people. One masked person approached and said that he had suggested before that he should replace the woman. But Zuma had clearly stated that none of them should go there no matter what happened. He added that Zuma said he would destroy the world and return there, and they should just watch. Finally, Momo and Okarun gained some clarity. That's what he meant, they realized. Okarun remarked that it was a different world than they had imagined. But Momo wondered why Zuma needed the gold ball. So she asked the group if they had heard Zuma mention anything about a gold ball. One of them answered that someone had entrusted it to him. Zuma was researching magical objects because he thought the diorama might be one. Just then, a person he didn't know appeared and volunteered to help. Momo was curious if they knew him, but they said they hadn't seen him yet. According to that man, he could destroy the diorama if he had that gold ball. Momo looked at Okarun and said that's what the man from Renjaku had said too. Okarun replied that the man seemed to know how to use the ball effectively. However, the woman said that a week had passed since Zuma entered there, so he might be in trouble now. That's why the group was losing patience. One of them said that the old man belonged there anyway, so Zuma shouldn't have to do dangerous things. So they just needed the old man to go back inside. But again, he shouted that he would never go back there. The tension rose once more, so Momo intervened. saying there might be another way. The old man retaliated and swung his sword. Momo told him to be careful because he almost hit her. However, she stumbled backward and fell towards the diorama, causing her to suddenly disappear. Okarun, the old man, and the group present were shocked by what happened. Okarun shouted and called out to her. Okarun couldn't believe what had happened. Meanwhile, Momo seemed to have skydived without a parachute, as she had fallen into the diorama. A vast area could be seen there, and Momo was wearing a helmet while in the air. As she approached the ground, various types of sweets could be seen below. Momo fell directly onto what appeared to be a large macaroon. She landed face down upon impact, and despite wearing a helmet, she couldn't help but cry from the experience. She called for help from anyone, but given the vastness of the area, there was no one around. However, the place was filled with various kinds of sweets and pastries. Momo was startled when a scroll suddenly appeared before her. It opened, and a feather wrote "Welcome to Danmara." Momo kneeled down to examine it and was surprised to read Danmara. The scroll also carried a card containing symbols. However, Momo couldn't understand their meaning, so she looked up at the sky and wondered how she could return from there. Nevertheless, she had no choice but to accept her situation. She stood up and said that for now, she would look for Zuma. Once she found him, she could ask him about those things. The vast expanse of the land was shown, and Momo began to explore the surroundings. She was in a forest full of sweet treats, so when her attention was caught by something hanging from a tree branch, she took what looked like cake pops and tasted them. She was amazed at how delicious they were. After a while, she reached a stone bridge and continued walking to find Zuma there. As she continued exploring, she reached the entrance to a castle. Outside, various weapons and shields were on display. Momo noticed a sword similar to the one carried by the old man. She practiced using and swinging it. Momo was pleased and chose to bring it inside. She hung it on her back and thought about what the old man had said about the place being filled with monsters. However, she hadn't encountered any yet. As she walked, she stepped on something strange. She noticed it was fresh cream and became annoyed. She then observed that the path inside was by climbing a steep hill. This concerned her, and the scroll appeared in front of her again that startled her. It was written that this was the national border hill, which puzzled Momo. Back in the real world, the group suggested returning the old man to the diorama, but someone stopped them. He pleaded for them to calm down and not push because it was dangerous. This was because they had all approached and peered into the diorama at the same time to look for Momo inside. They had difficulty identifying exactly where she was inside because she was so tiny. However, Okarun noticed that a figurine was moving. After looking at it carefully, he realized it was Momo. The masked man didn't seem surprised since she had entered the diorama. He mentioned there was also a figurine of Zuma there, and Okarun searched for it. But the man recounted that they hadn't seen him for 2 or 3 days. So, they thought their companion might be in danger. Okarun asked why they hadn't mentioned this earlier. Okarun continued to observe and said that it wasn't a diorama, which surprised the man. From afar, Momo looked like a figurine, and there was a number 1 placed at the entrance of the castle where the national border hill was blocking the way. While inside Danmara, Momo figured out that she was inside a game. Outside, everyone was shocked when Okarun mentioned that it was a game. He pointed out that the patterning on the ground looked like squares on a board game. And when it comes to games, there's surely a way to finish them. He trusted that Momo would be able to complete this game. Inside, Momo could be seen struggling to climb the hill. She was extremely irritated at whoever came up with this idea. She vowed that she's gonna make him regret it. However, because the surface was smooth, she slipped. She couldn't believe she was back to zero again. When she fell to the ground, she angrily punched the fresh cream out of frustration, when suddenly she was startled by a loud noise. It turned out to be a giant knight that had smashed the side of the castle. He looked at Momo and approached her. He had a shield marked with symbols similar to those she had seen on the card she held earlier. When the giant looked at Momo, she just said hello. However, he just struck the wall, causing the place to crumble. So Momo ran. She called him a jerk and told him to watch it. She suddenly extended her hand to use her ability. However, to her great surprise, nothing happened. Meanwhile, the knight charged at her, and all Momo could do was dodge his attack. Again, Momo tried to raise her hand, but her power still didn't work. So she pulled out her sword and asked the enemy for a moment to get into position. She faced it while holding the sword, then shouted Okarun's name. As the giant swung his enormous sword again, the surroundings were destroyed, but luckily someone saved Momo from being hit. Momo was shocked when she noticed this. Two umbrellas suddenly emerged and blocked the bricks that were about to hit them. The rescuer put Momo down and asked if she could walk, to which she answered yes. The rescuer faced the giant knight while Momo stood to the side. When he took a stance, the man resembled Okarun, and those umbrellas were his weapons. Momo was shocked by this. When the knight attacked again, the man charged with his umbrella. He struck the tip of the giant's sword with the end of his weapon and suddenly pressed a button. When it opened, the entire sword suddenly exploded, traveling up to the enemy's hand and arm. Momo couldn't believe what had happened, while the man nimbly jumped and charged at the enemy. He discarded the used umbrella and brought another one and went straight for the giant's head and grabbed onto his helmet. He took his umbrella and thrust it with full force directly into the enemy's helmet. He pressed the button on the handle again, which caused the giant knight's entire body to explode. Because of this, the enemy was destroyed and defeated. He then opened the umbrella and used it to land safely on the ground. Upon landing, the man asked who she was and why she came there. Momo replied that she was looking for Onii-Zuma. Surprisingly, the guy who helped her introduced himself as the Onii-Zuma they had been looking for. Zuma returned to his normal appearance, which surprised Momo. While he seemed to have difficulty stepping on the ground, Momo couldn't believe that he was the one they had been looking for all this time. Zuma asked why she wanted to see him, and so Momo mentioned that he had the gold ball. He was shocked when she asked for it back, saying it belonged to her friend. Zuma then realized that if she knew about the gold ball, it meant she could also use powers. However, he apologized and said he couldn't return it until it was finished. He took out the gold ball and explained that in that world, without it, they couldn't use their abilities. Momo was surprised by this and realized that's why Zuma wanted it. Zuma was puzzled that she didn't know about this. Momo asked who told him about it, to which he replied that it was a man he didn't know. But the man knew a lot about magic objects. Zuma recounted that while he was reading in the library, this man suddenly appeared and spoke to him. When Momo asked what he looked like, Zuma said he didn't know. Whenever he tried to remember, he would suddenly feel dizzy. It seemed the man knew what he was thinking and that he had powers. The man accompanied him to the police box to retrieve the gold ball. And for some reason, the police didn't suspect him. Anyway, that's where the man mentioned that if Zuma didn't bring the gold ball into the diorama, he wouldn't be able to use his power once inside. Momo was curious about why the man helped him, and Zuma replied that the man wanted him to destroy that world for him. Apparently, the man couldn't enter the diorama, so he wanted Zuma to enter in his place. Momo was confused about why the man couldn't enter. Zuma just scratched his head and said he didn't know more, as that was all the man had told him. But if it meant he could help his friends, then he didn't care either way. Zuma admitted it had been difficult because this world was full of monsters. But Momo couldn't believe it, as she hadn't encountered any since she arrived. He replied that this was because he had killed them all. Momo was shocked by this. She then pointed something out, asking if Zuma hadn't noticed that it was a game, which surprised him. She told him to look carefully at how the ropes were neatly arranged. It looked like it was set up like an athletics tournament. Momo added that they didn't need to defeat all the monsters there. All they had to do was focus on clearing each stage. And if they cleared each stage, then they might be able to get out. Zuma asked if she was a genius, and she simply replied that she already knows. Momo slowly walked and invited him along. She mentioned that his friends were worried. Zuma just looked at her, and as he followed, he asked for her name. Momo didn't want to answer, but if he returned the gold ball, then she might tell him. Zuma watched her try to climb the wall several times. He then thought of removing his geta, the traditional Japanese footwear, and placed them on his arms. He ran barefoot and reached the rope before Momo. He invited her to climb up to his position, saying he would pull her up. This irritated Momo, but finally, the two managed to climb up there. Momo praised Zuma, saying nice job, and asked why he didn't use his powers if he could. It would have made their climb easier. Zuma replied that his powers weren't all-powerful. Both were suddenly shocked when they noticed the next stage, which looked like a giant obstacle course. Momo thought this stage was crazy and looked for its bottom. Suddenly, Zuma started undressing, which surprised Momo. When she asked what he was doing, he said he was worried about her skirt, so he gave her his pants to wear. Momo thanked him, and they both got ready. Momo was confident that with Zuma's power, they could finish this stage quickly. Because of what she said, Zuma looked for the gold ball and mentioned it was in his pants pocket. Momo was irritated because she wanted to finish quickly, making Zuma apologize. Momo searched for the gold ball in the borrowed pants pocket but had difficulty. So, she asked which pocket it was in. Zuma was shocked when she said it wasn't there. He couldn't believe what had happened. Looking around, Momo noticed it had fallen into the course. It seemed to have dropped while Zuma was taking off his pants. Momo called him a dumbass and told him to think before acting. She ordered him to go down and get it. So, Zuma went down and walked on the balance beam. He was struggling, and Momo said it was because he was still wearing his geta. She told him to take them off. But Zuma asked if she didn't think the geta were cool. Momo didn't care about that and just told him to continue. Zuma became concerned when he saw giant frogs wearing chef's hats around, while he was holding his sandals. He looked at them carefully and told Momo he would need her help. Momo was disgusted by the frogs and noticed that they were also after the gold ball. So, she went down on another balance beam and hurried to get to the gold ball before the frogs did. While the frogs were moving to get closer to the gold ball, Zuma slid down the chocolate slide and Momo used a candy cane to descend. She landed on a biscuit, but when it wobbled, she was forced to jump from one biscuit to another in a line to reach the other side. Momo was clearly struggling to pull herself up, so Zuma told her not to fall because he wouldn't be able to help her. Meanwhile, Zuma jumped onto a pole at the side where there was a frog. He kicked the frog chef off, and Momo was pleased to see his progress. She praised Zuma for it and said he was on the warpath. Momo then prepared for her next obstacle. As she was gaining momentum, she mentioned that she also had been through hell and back. She grabbed onto what looked like a giant punching bag zipline that suddenly started moving. Upon reaching the other point, Momo let go to retrieve the gold ball. She was worried when she almost fell off. However, something suddenly hit her face, and it turned out to be one of the frog chefs trying to make her fall. It called her a monster, but Momo retorted that he's the monster. So she kicked its left leg, causing it to lie down in pain. Momo stood up and said they should see who's tougher between them. She pushed the frog chef to make it fall. She was surprised to see Zuma back on the balance beam with several frog chefs blocking his way. Momo remarked that Zuma, whom he keeps calling Underpants, was truly unstoppable. Using a large spoon, Zuma hit the frogs blocking him on the balance beam. He told Momo to hurry and get the gold ball, saying he'd take care of those frog chefs. Momo asked who he was calling you. So, while fighting, Zuma asked for her name again, but Momo just replied nice try. Zuma's frog opponent used a large fork to fight him. While this was happening, someone suddenly spoke, inviting everyone to eat tasty treats. The voice asked if they wanted chocolate. Momo wondered where the sound was coming from while Zuma mentioned that his bastard opponent was tricky. Suddenly, a large hand holding a rolling pin appeared, destroying parts of the obstacle course. Momo became worried when she noticed that because of this, the balance beam was wrecked and Zuma fell. It appeared to be a giant pastry chef who looked at Momo, who was perched on a large chocolate bar. Momo didn't know what to do and looked around. She noticed some frog chefs busy at work, passing what looked like chocolate balls to each other. Momo was confused by what was happening around her. Again, she heard the voice, and it was coming from the giant chef, who repeated that everyone will have something to eat. The frog chefs continued producing biscuits as the voice invited them to eat some tasty treats. Because Momo didn't understand what was happening, she just ran to find Zuma. The voice asked if they wanted to eat candy. Meanwhile, Momo was shouting Zuma's name and looking for him. Finally, she saw his arm. He had been pinned down by parts of the obstacle course, so she told him to hold on. But he threw a lollipop at her face, which surprised Momo. Zuma told her not to let go of it. Momo looked back when something was destroyed again, and the chef hit something with the rolling pin. She was shocked, and as Zuma stood up, he said the giant was playing a version of color tag. It seemed that if they couldn't hold on to the things the giant mentioned, he would try to kill them. Zuma said the cookies served as a cushion and saved him. Momo was worried when she noticed that even the frogs were being attacked by the giant chef. She wondered if they weren't on the same side. Zuma had no idea about that. Momo suddenly noticed paper frogs on the ground. She wondered what they were and why there were so many origami on the floor. Zuma replied that those were the defeated frogs. When Momo picked one up, she wondered if they were shikigami, like cursed spirits. The giant chef was heard again saying they would all eat tasty treats. He asked if they wanted Florentine. So, the two hurried to run, and Momo had difficulty understanding what he said. Zuma replied it was Florentine, but he didn't know what it was, so he asked Momo. He held on to a biscuit, but that wasn't it. They noticed the frogs were approaching too. Finally, Momo found a Florentine, and Zuma quickly ran towards it to touch it too. However, Momo fell along with the Florentine. Zuma called her a moron, saying she put her weight on it, so it broke. Zuma caught her by the foot and told her to share the Florentine, so he reached for it. The giant chef moved to hit the frogs on the side who hadn't touched the Florentine with the rolling pin. Even though Momo and Zuma weren't the targets, they were affected when part of the place was destroyed and they fell. The giant chef continued the game, so Momo hurried Zuma to pull her up. He replied that she should let go of the Florentine because they didn't need it anymore. Zuma was struggling because only his lower body was holding on while he supported Momo. So Momo told him to use his back muscles. However, Zuma shushed her and blamed her, calling her a klutz. Breathless, Momo couldn't believe Zuma called her a klutz. She said he didn't even know what a Florentine was. Zuma replied that there was already another one coming. The giant chef again said to eat tasty treats and asked if they wanted a donut. The two went straight to search for donuts in the area. They ran hurriedly and finally found a donut nearby. As they approached it, they were hit by treats thrown at them by the frogs. Momo tried to stop them, but Zuma said to forget about them because they were running out of time. They jumped together to land on a large donut in the middle. However, they weren't the only ones who noticed it. Other frogs did too. The giant chef hit those who didn't touch the donut again. Momo and Zuma were in an awkward situation when they saw 4 frog chefs in front of them. They suddenly rushed at each other, and Momo tried to make them leave. One replied that they should be the ones to leave. The frog added that Danmara wouldn't let them escape. It called them monsters and told them they will die there. Momo was curious about what it was saying and needed, pushing it to the side. As Momo had said, they were the monsters. The frog she pushed grabbed her foot, while another held her right arm. Momo struggled to break free from the 2 frogs that wouldn't let her go. She was about to fall when Zuma hit the frogs in the face with his geta, saving Momo. He was very proud of his geta. Momo admitted she was wrong about them and thanked him for his help. She then explained that the giant chef was on a treat-smashing spree, and now there were fewer places they could go. She looked for the gold ball, and Zuma pointed out it was on the macaron. Momo noticed it wasn't too far and suggested they go straight there. But Zuma objected, saying they didn't have enough time and needed to wait for the next round. Momo argued they couldn't wait because the frogs might get it. Zuma defended that if they made a mistake, they would surely die. But Momo insisted they couldn't just wait and do nothing. She was determined and convinced Zuma to act. They looked at each other as the giant chef spoke again. They jumped together towards the macaron, hoping it would say macaron. However, the chef asked if they wanted to eat some cake. Momo was furious. Zuma headed straight for the macaron and told her to go for the cake while he'd get the gold ball. But he was hit again by donuts and candy thrown by the frogs. He couldn't dodge anymore, but Momo jumped to help him. Zuma was worried when he saw Momo fall with frog chefs behind her, but Momo told him to go straight and get the gold ball. A frog was rushing alongside Zuma to grab it, but luckily Zuma pushed it away and got the gold ball first. However, because they didn't touch the cake, they were hit by the giant rolling pin of the chef. Their footing was destroyed, and Zuma fell. The chef kept smashing around, causing Momo to fall too. After that round, the giant chef posed again, but it was to thank them for their patronage, saying they would close for now. A hand was seen grabbing the rolling pin, which turned out to be Momo's giant hand ability. She made a heart shape with her hand and asked if he was for real. She said to let them eat cake. Momo then posed to attack using her Momo Tri-Beam, which hit the giant chef square in the face, causing it to fall and be defeated. A multitude of candies scattered from the chef's body after Momo used her special move on it, and afterward, she fell along with the candies onto the ground. Due to the chef's enormous size, when its entire body transformed into candy, it covered almost the entire area of the candy obstacle course. While lying among the numerous sweets, Momo commented that from a certain point of view, this situation was heaven. After that, she tried to get out of the candies but seemed to be stuck and unable to move, but fortunately, Zuma arrived and pulled her out of the giant candies. Momo thanked him, to which Zuma brushed it off and said he should be the one saying that because she had saved him. Let's go back to the time before Momo defeated the giant chef, and it was shown that Zuma had managed to reach the golden ball. The giant chef prepared to hit him with its rolling pin, so he also prepared to use his umbrella weapons, but when he tried to invoke it, he couldn't materialize it, causing Momo to ask him while watching what he was doing and telling him to attack, to which he explained that he couldn't because his spiritual powers hadn't been restored yet, which also worried Momo. He said he had already used 2 umbrellas earlier against the giant knight, so it would take a while before his power returned. Because of this, he was forced to dodge the chef's rolling pin and jump between the platforms on his sides, and he grabbed onto a protruding candy cane, and while hanging there, Momo shouted at him, and it turned out she had jumped towards him, and she ordered him to throw her the golden ball, which he immediately did, and Momo caught it. Momo quickly used her powers to envelop herself in a shield, and using her powers again, she grabbed Zuma from the protruding candy cane, which surprised him and made him wonder what it was. Momo held onto a still-standing candy pole and pulled herself towards it, placing Zuma on a cake so the chef wouldn't attack him. Zuma was concerned about Momo's situation because the chef was about to attack again, and soon its attack landed on her, causing Zuma to stare in disbelief at what had happened. However, Momo managed to dodge and grab the chef's rolling pin to propel herself upward when it swung again to attack, and this is when Momo used her Momo Tri-Beam. Back to the present, Momo gave Zuma a peace sign, while Zuma called her a wicked badass for what she did, to which she agreed and told him not to underestimate her. Momo offered the golden ball back to Zuma, which confused him, so she explained that wasn't he unable to return it until he destroyed this world. So it is what it is, and she would let him borrow it. Zuma didn't accept her offer and said she should hold on to it because his powers were depleted for now, and he added that she was stronger, which made Momo start to grin and told him to say that again to make her feel good, to which Zuma repeated that she can keep the ball, irritating Momo, who said that wasn't what she meant. Suddenly, more scrolls appeared around them, causing Zuma to comment, "Here's something else," while Momo said this was getting annoying. The scroll that appeared in front of them came with a card each, and written on it was the name of the chef they defeated, Nam Nam Bongo, with a skill called Death Patissier, and it had 2,500 health points and seemed to be a strike/drill card. The scroll explained that they had obtained a new card, Nam Nam Bongo, and it had a skill that allowed them to use its powers when they ate treats. Zuma wondered what that meant and what this card was, and Momo explained that she didn't pay attention to these things before and asked if this was some kind of hint about the game. While Zuma seemed to understand the meaning, so he tried eating a donut from the ground. He bit into it, causing Momo to ask how it was, to which he said it was delicious, so Momo pointed out that wasn't what she meant. It wasn't long before Momo noticed something about him and started pointing while looking concerned, which made him wonder what was wrong. It turned out that what Momo was pointing at was his legs, which had turned into donuts, shocking him as well. He panicked about how to return them to normal while Momo just laughed at him because for her, this was actually hilarious. His legs clenched and suddenly propelled him high up due to the springiness of his feet, and he landed headfirst on the ground because he didn't know how to control it yet. Momo was amazed and said that this was how the power they obtained worked, and she tried to lick a lollipop to see what power it would give her, and it turned out that it made her body sticky. She was disappointed with the power she got while Zuma couldn't stand up because whenever he stretched or bent, his feet would launch him into the air. Momo looked at their scroll while wondering how they could return to normal, and while thinking about the word cards, she remembered something. She pulled something out of her pocket and revealed a card with 9 circles arranged in a circular shape, and in one circle was the image of the knight they had fought earlier, and now the picture of the chef they had just defeated was added. When she took out that card, 2 more cards appeared beside her, one of which was Nom Nom Bongo, and the card they had obtained earlier when they defeated the knight, Carmine. Momo tried to hold the Carmine card, and when she touched it, a large shield appeared and the effect of the candy she ate disappeared, which amazed her, and in the process, her pants became loose. She called Zuma to show him the card, to which he just told her to wear her pants properly. She told Zuma to try holding the Dark Knight card, and when Zuma tried it, he also got a shield and his legs returned to normal. Zuma was nervous because he thought he would be a donut forever, while Momo discovered that if you touched the card again, the effect it released would return. Because of this, Momo realized that they needed to fill the 4 larger circles, and they could do that by defeating boss-type monsters, and when they got them all, they would be able to beat the game. After that, Momo said she forgot to tell Zuma, but she also used a special move earlier so she wouldn't be able to use her powers for a while, causing Zuma to ask while standing up if she was serious and that she should pull up her pants. He added that if that was the case, they needed to make full use of the cards and now they should try different treats. Momo was excited about that because they could eat all those treats without guilt, while Zuma focused more on finding his Geta sandals, which irritated Momo and made her say that Zuma was a bit of an airhead, to which Zuma responded that she's one to talk. Despite Momo's excitement about eating the treats, they didn't read the small description written on the Nom Nom Bongo card that said if they ate things in this world, they could become residents of this world. Let's return to the outside of this game, where Zuma's companions were talking, and the apparent vice leader of their group was saying that they would also enter the board game because if what Zuma and the others were doing was truly a game, it would be easier for them to defeat it if they worked together. He explained that after Momo entered the board game, Zuma didn't come out, which meant they were traversing it together. Okarun shouted to wait because he thought this wouldn't be easy, especially since they were dealing with a cursed object. While thinking about Seiko, he said he could call a spirit medium, so couldn't they wait that long? But the vice leader asked him if he's willing to just sit on his ass even though the girl important to him is stuck inside. It was okay for all of them there to put their lives in danger for their friends, and no matter how afraid they were, they would never run from an enemy that was right in front of them. Nevertheless, Okarun still thought rationally and shouted for them to calm down while thinking about Momo, because if they failed here, they wouldn't be able to save anyone, to which the vice leader countered that if they were too slow, they might be too late. He said he understood where Okarun was coming from, so he should do what he wanted, and they would do the same. After that, he shouted at his men to prepare and gather, while Okarun decided to follow them and transform into his Turbo Granny cursed form. While preparing, he thought about Momo again and commented in his mind that he was at his limit too. On the other hand, let's return to Momo and Zuma, where they were jumping up a high tower while being chased by a Gorgon-like monster that resembled Medusa. Using their donut spring ability, they continued climbing the tower to avoid being caught by the monster, and while doing this, Momo fearfully asked Zuma if his spiritual power had recovered, to which he said not yet and asked if they should try other treats and if they had anything that could help them take down the Gorgon, to which Momo shouted that they had tried everything. The Gorgon continued chasing them, causing Zuma to shout that this was too difficult while Momo pointed out that it was a stone monster that even the Dark Knight's sword couldn't scratch. Zuma became more worried because he could see the top of the tower and said that at this rate, they would be eaten there. So Momo shouted that she knew that. After gaining a small gap from the monster, Zuma suggested if they should just jump from there and run, and didn't they still have marshmallows, and if they ate those, they wouldn't die when they landed. Momo threw a square cracker while saying to wait, and the stone monster suddenly ate it, which frightened Zuma and made him realize that it would just eat them mid-air if they jumped, and Momo added that they had nowhere to run so they needed to take it down. After the Gorgon ate what Momo threw, she noticed that the monster's color suddenly changed, which surprised her. While rummaging through her bag, she found some Spice-Arama chips with hot chili flavor and said they hadn't tried those yet. So Zuma pointed out if she had just brought those into the game, to which she replied that it's not like the treats themselves come with powers. She said they needed to try anything they could, and she ate a piece of chip, which allowed her to breathe fire. Zuma was surprised and amazed, and immediately asked for some too, while Momo grinned and boastfully said for the monster to prepare to be engulfed by her flames. After Zuma ate, they simultaneously breathed fire at the Gorgon, but even though it hit the monster's face solidly, it still managed to pass through and continue chasing them, so they quickly ate a donut in response to jump and distance themselves again. They noticed that they were almost at the very top, so Zuma pointed out that they couldn't go to a higher floor anymore, so this was the end for them. But Momo didn't lose hope and said to wait because there was still something they hadn't tried. She took out a plastic-wrapped candy and fed it to the monster, which made it all sticky, surprising both her and Zuma. And Momo commented that she knew the monster's body would turn into candy here, and she realized it when it changed color earlier. This is where she also learned that the Nom Nom Bongo card they got didn't just apply to them, but also worked on any monster she fed treats to. Momo handed the Spice-orama chips to Zuma for him to eat too, and they simultaneously breathed fire on the Gorgon again, and because its body had turned to candy, it started to melt. Zuma noticed that the monster was trying to run, but because its body was sticky, it moved slowly. Before the monster could get far from them, Momo quickly used the Carmine card and summoned the Dark Knight's shield and sword, and jumped towards the monster to slice its head while Zuma continued breathing fire. In the next scene, it turns out that Okarun didn't follow Zuma's friends but quickly ran to Momo's house to call Seiko. However, when he got there, he found that Seiko wasn't there and Turbo Granny told him that she had gone to work, while Vamola happily invited him in, and Rin was curious. Okarun was also puzzled as to why their class rep was here, and she greeted him good evening and said that she owed Seiko a favor from before, so she brought her something as a thank you. Vamola offered Okarun some of the Hyakame Goku that Rin had brought, to which he replied that it was fine and he appreciated it, but added that this wasn't the time for that because currently, Momo had been spirited away by a board game using a weird curse, so he came here to ask for Seiko's help, and when he said that, Vamola became worried while Turbo Granny laughed and said Momo deserved it, which made Vamola comment on how mean she was. Okarun asked Turbo Granny if she knew anything that could help them, and he explained the appearance of that board game to her, and that when people are pulled into it, they become game pieces, to which Turbo Granny ignored him because she claimed she couldn't hear him, and asked what she would get out of it. Mai commented that as if this blockhead, referring to Turbo Granny, would know anything, so Rin told her why she would say that, while Turbo Granny started stretching her arm while telling Mai to take it easy. She trash-talked her by calling her a nitwit shithead, and suddenly punched while asking who she thought she was trying to pick a fight with. However, Turbo Granny couldn't reach her, so she just shouted at her to die, while Mai called her a moron, so Vamola told Turbo Granny to stop while Rin was asking Mai to apologize. While the two were still arguing, Vamola explained to Okarun that those two don't get along and are always fighting, to which Okarun silently agreed. After that, Okarun called Mai and asked if she knew anything about cursed board games, to which Turbo Granny explained that this turtle brain's head might be big but it's completely empty, with a 3-second limit on how long she can remember the past. Because of this, Mai also trash-talked Turbo Granny and they started bickering again, so Okarun stopped them and said this wasn't the time for that. Okarun knelt while begging Turbo Granny that they needed her help because didn't she know about magic objects and he would give her anything in exchange. He got Turbo Granny's attention when he said he would give her anything and she asked if it was really anything, to which Okarun agreed. Turbo Granny asked if there was a black cloth near the wooden box, so Okarun thought about it and said there wasn't any, causing Turbo Granny to comment that this was the worst and what idiot would do such a thing. Turbo Granny called Rin and said she needed to move too, and after that, they quickly went to the place where the wooden box was. Turbo Granny didn't bring Vamola along because she said she would just be a nuisance there, so Okarun pointed out that Vamola was tough too. Rin started to get nervous and asked what good she would bring if she came along, so Turbo Granny explained that they had a lot of gear so she would be their porter, to which Rin just responded with a yes ma'am. On the other hand, let's return to Momo and Zuma's situation, and inside the board game, they had arrived at a town. While walking, they encountered a frog wearing a chef's attire while holding a large fork, and Momo commented that it was seriously staring at them while Zuma said it didn't seem like it would attack. Momo remembered something, so she started rummaging through her bag, and she took out the newly acquired card from the Medusa boss. and it turns out that the card they got from it was rock-hard Costanus with a skill called Medusa, where if they used it, their bodies would turn to stone and it would slow down their movements. Momo pointed out to Zuma that it said their bodies would turn to stone, and using that, she thought they would be okay even if they were stabbed. They tried using the skill of this card, so both Momo and Zuma turned to stone, but when they tried to move towards the frog, they moved extremely slowly. Because of this, they returned themselves to normal and said they wouldn't get anywhere if they did that and how useless this card was, and Momo complained that this was what they got after struggling so hard to fight that rock-hard Costanus. They both stared at the frog and decided to just use the Carmine card to summon a sword and shield, while the frog continued to stare at them, and soon it suddenly spoke and welcomed them to the town of ice, which surprised them. The two were puzzled, and Zuma asked if that meant this place would become cold. Momo tried to talk to the frog and said that if it wanted to fight, they wouldn't hold back. So what was going on here? But the frog just repeated its welcome. Zuma pointed out that it was repeating itself, while Momo realized that this was how it worked and tried to ask the frog what its name was, to which the frog just repeated what it had said earlier. Zuma said it repeated itself again, while Momo said it was one of those types that could only speak set phrases. After that, they decided to just walk further into town and leave that NPC behind, and while walking, Momo asked if they didn't see these in video games, to which Zuma asked if that meant it wasn't an enemy, and Momo replied that she wasn't sure, but for now, her guess was that it wasn't like the ones they had encountered thus far. Something caught Momo's attention, and she leaned to their left while saying that something smelled good, causing Zuma to react and ask if they were sure about this place and that they wouldn't be attacked by everyone there all at once, to which Momo replied, while heading towards the smell, that she didn't know. When they reached where the smell was coming from, they saw a large piece of meat being grilled by a frog chef, and the desire was visible on their faces when they saw it. Momo happily approached the meat while saying that they had only been eating sweets and she thought she was going crazy from it, while Zuma asked if it was okay for them to eat this. Momo asked the frog cooking the meat if they could have some, to which it welcomed them and asked if it could take their order, while a scroll appeared, which puzzled Momo and Zuma. Text appeared there stating a quest that required 2 Fs to get the meat, which confused Momo. Because of this, Momo thought they needed money for it, which disheartened her, and she shouted that there were 2 hungry children asking the frog, while Zuma noticed something and said to wait. He noticed the 2 frog symbols, and here Momo remembered something and started rummaging through her bag and took out the origami frogs they had gotten when they were still in the candy obstacle course. It turns out her thinking was correct, and the frog thanked them when they gave these to it and thanked them for their patronage. In exchange, they were able to buy 2 pieces of meat using their origami frogs, and because of this, they were both filled with joy and desire as they stared at this meat, and they simultaneously shouted bon appetit before eating. After a few moments, they had finished the delicious and juicy meat they had bought, and the joy and satisfaction were visible on both their faces. While still stuffed, Momo yawned and said she suddenly felt sleepy, so Zuma told her not to sleep because they were behind enemy lines. Momo pointed out that this place looked like it would have an inn, so Zuma said he didn't agree with that and it was too risky, and they really couldn't sleep in this kind of place, to which Momo asked if he thought it would be okay and that no one was attacking them now, causing Zuma to comment on how unreal she was and asked if she wasn't afraid. Momo reasoned that Zuma was tough, so Zuma commented that she expected him to handle it, to which Momo said she was serious about this and it was time for them to get some rest because if not, they would end up in trouble since neither of them had fully recovered their powers. Momo also pointed out that the design on their card had 4 large circles, and they had already defeated the Patissier, Snake, and Knight. So didn't that mean there was only 1 stage left? And if it was like most games, the final stage would be extremely difficult. Zuma replied that he understood that and agreed to rest, but they would take turns keeping watch. Momo agreed to his proposal, and soon they started looking for an inn within the town. They explored it, and before long, they arrived at an extensively stylish building with an abundance of candy as decoration. The frog and manager welcomed them and said that 2 rooms cost 4 Fs, which irritated Momo because they needed money, while Zuma said he didn't have anything like that in his name, and Momo also pointed out that she only had 2 Fs left. Zuma suggested that Momo should get a room for herself and he would keep watch from the hall, to which Momo disagreed and said she wouldn't be able to sleep due to guilt. She said Zuma should use the room and in return, he should go all out later, to which Zuma objected that as if he could do that and it was Momo who thought of picking those up. So Momo also objected and replied no way. After their argument, they decided to just enter one room together, but when they went in, they only saw one bed, which left them speechless and poker-faced. Zuma pointed out that this was Momo's idea, so what were they going to do now? To which Momo replied that they would rest. However, Zuma decided to just go out and said he would stay in the hall, and Momo should just tell him when it was time to switch. When Zuma went out to the hall, he just sat beside their door, while Momo stared at him and commented cool. Momo looked for where the bath was, and she found a large machine that looked like a frog, and it turned out to be a high-speed washing machine, which delighted her, and she immediately took off her clothes to wash them because she had been feeling grody for a long time. When she put all her clothes in, the frog washing machine started moving as if it was gargling her clothes, which made her wonder if that was okay. After that, she opened the door to the bath, and when she opened it, she saw a beautiful bath with a view overlooking the town. After a while Zuma was just poker-faced outside the room waiting, he was surprised when the freshened-up Momo called him, and she had something she wanted to show him. Momo laughed when she saw how he had been waiting there, and said that it was hilarious. They entered the room and Zuma commented on how quickly she had finished, so he asked if Momo had really slept, to which Momo just said not to think about it, and that the bath here was super deluxe, and this washing machine could wash and dry her clothes extremely fast. When Momo brought him to the bath, she excused herself and said she would go out and he could sleep first if he wanted. As Momo left, she shouted, "Take your time," while Zuma stared at her and suddenly slapped his face to regain his composure and went to the bath, while Momo sat in the same spot where Zuma was sitting earlier. While sitting outside, Momo felt worry and sadness, and she called out Okarun's name. On the other hand, in Okarun and Rin's situation, Rin asked him if he didn't think they should stop for a while, to which Turbo Granny said not to stop and that they would outrun those chasing them. It turned out that Bega the demon cop was chasing them, and he was telling them to stop because they shouldn't be wandering around wearing their school uniforms at this hour, but Turbo Granny didn't let them stop running from this persistent cop. When Rin said they should stop, Okarun replied that they couldn't do that because Momo was waiting for them. Let's return to Momo and Zuma, where Zuma came out of the room to tell Momo it was time for them to swap, but he found her already asleep while sitting. He tried calling her, but she didn't respond, so he tapped her to wake her up, but due to fatigue, she just groggily groaned. So he decided to just help her walk to the bed while saying she shouldn't sleep outside, to which Momo sleepily agreed. While laying Momo down, he also told her that she was the one acting all big earlier, even telling him they needed to stay here. Momo seemed to be dreaming about Okarun and suddenly spoke the words "Tell me you love me," which caught Zuma's attention. Zuma appeared to feel something because of Momo's words, but he just stared at the sleeping Momo, and after tucking her into bed, he went out and started thinking about what Momo's words to him meant. Momo had a deep sleep, and she dreamed of eating a steamed pork bun, causing her to bite her pillow, but soon she woke up and realized she had fallen asleep. She was speechless when she saw that she was inside the room, so she quickly went out to check on Zuma while feeling worried. When she went out, she saw Zuma sprawled on the floor, which concerned her, so she approached him and tried to talk to him while apologizing and saying she had fallen asleep like a dog. Zuma's drool was visible as he lay unconscious while Momo continued apologizing for letting him sleep outside. It wasn't long before Zuma groaned as if he was about to wake up, and he immediately sat up and started looking around while saying he had crashed and asking Momo if she was okay, to which Momo imaginatively stabbed herself while asking for forgiveness, which puzzled Zuma as to why. The newly awoken Zuma asked if she had slept well, which made Momo feel even worse and said not to ask that and that she had done something terrible to him. So Zuma was puzzled again and asked why she kept saying that and if Momo had rested, wasn't that a good thing? But Momo felt even more hurt and told him to stop. After their rest at the inn, they walked around the town again, and Zuma commented that in the end, the frogs didn't attack them, to which Momo agreed and said he was right in a more formal manner, So Zuma told her to stop acting like that, but Momo reasoned that she felt extremely guilty, to which Zuma added that it was annoying. Zuma handed the golden ball to Momo and told her to see if her powers had returned, and Momo took it and tried, where they saw that her powers had indeed returned. Momo did a happy dance when she got it back, and Zuma asked if it was some kind of spiritual power she was releasing, to which Momo shook her head and said it wasn't like that for her and it was more like a superpower. Momo returned the question to Zuma, and Zuma answered that his came from umbrellas, which made Momo ask what those were and if they were like umbrella yokai or something, to which Zuma replied that he didn't know, which puzzled Momo and made her ask how he learned to use them. So Zuma answered that he didn't want to say. Zuma took out his 2 umbrellas to show Momo, which impressed Momo and she called them badass, and she also asked if he could use them to fly. So Zuma explained that he could leap from the force when they open, but he couldn't fly like a bird. He added that when he opens an umbrella, it releases its spiritual power and he can't use it again, and when he opens both, he'll run out of spiritual power. While Momo was commenting on how many conditions his power had, something suddenly dripped on her face, and it turned out that it had started raining where they were, which worried Momo. But Zuma quickly acted and opened one of his umbrellas and held it over Momo to keep her from getting wet. Momo was surprised by this and asked if it was okay to open an umbrella there because they were about to face the final stage next, and Zuma was too close to her. So Zuma asked what choice they had and called her a moron, which puzzled her. So Zuma explained what would happen if she got sick, so Momo should take shelter. But because their bodies were so close, Momo was blushing while shouting that this was too sudden, and Zuma asked if she felt cold, to which Momo replied no. Momo pushed Zuma away because he was too close to her, so Zuma told her to stop chattering and that she needed to take care of her throat, which irritated Momo, and she told him to stop acting like this. While trying to stop Zuma, Momo remembered Okarun in his Turbo Granny curse form and explained that actually, his personality also changes when he uses his powers, and she commented that this was such a headache and told Zuma to just return to normal. Zuma returned to normal and was puzzled by what happened, and soon he became worried because he had used one of his umbrellas, so Momo kneed him and called him a numbnuts while telling him to get his emotions checked. Zuma asked why he had opened it and who cared if they got wet in the rain, which irritated Momo even more, and she shouted that now he was just making it worse. As a solution to their problem, Zuma picked up a large leaf to use as a shield against the rain while they walked. When they reached the ruins of what looked like a castle, the rain gradually stopped, and as they explored this place, they saw a multitude of jelly-like creatures in the area. There were also jelly-like creatures floating around emitting light like lanterns, which amazed Momo. While Zuma watched Momo enjoying the surroundings, it brought a smile to his face as if it was bringing a warm feeling to his body. After a while, they reached the outside of a castle where a multitude of soldiers, behemoths, a dragon, and what looked like a griffin had also gathered. They were stunned by what they saw from atop a castle wall, and here a quest scroll appeared. This quest was called Castle Siege, and they needed to defeat the armies and destroy the crystal inside the castle. The scroll also listed the units taking part in this quest. When they read what they needed to do here, they stared at the enormous number of enemy troops, and Zuma started counting them. And soon they commented that this wasn't going to happen. The two could see how outnumbered they were as they faced the multitude of soldiers and monsters of the castle they needed to infiltrate. And Momo suddenly said to wait because it seemed like they had entered impossible mode, and they even had dragon-looking things to fight against, while Zuma continued counting how many enemies they had. Momo read the scroll carefully and said that this didn't make sense and there must be more information for this, and here she noticed that there was a dice symbol, so she touched it. 3 dice began to appear out of thin air, which caught Momo's attention and made Zuma comment that something was appearing here. Momo read the scroll again and saw that if they threw these dice, they could create an army. The yellow die was for multiples of 100, the red for multiples of 10, and blue for multiples of 1. Momo understood here that if they got a 6 on the yellow die, they would have 600 troops and so on and so forth. If that's the case, Zuma said, they could now match the massive army in front of them, and Momo asked him how many enemy troops were there because he had been counting them earlier, to which Zuma explained that he got lazy and just stopped partway, which left Momo speechless and asking if he was serious. Zuma said he had reached 200, so Momo asked if that was the total, but Zuma replied that he didn't know and it might just be 1/3. Momo said she understood, and if so, they were facing around 600 enemy troops there. She stretched her shoulder while preparing to roll for 600, so Zuma told her to wait and asked if she was really going to roll for the hundreds just like that. Zuma suggested that they should start with single digits, and sometimes her enthusiasm was scary, to which Momo agreed because it was a good point, but she quickly took back her agreement, reasoning that the numbers she would roll here would really scare Zuma and she had seen the future. When she rolled the die, she got a 6, which amazed Zuma while she posed boastfully saying who did Zuma think he was talking to, and she explained that when she used her superpowers, it was always a perfect 6, which made Zuma say badass. However, the game suddenly made a buzzing sound that got their attention, and a scroll appeared saying that due to cheating, their yellow die was 0. Zuma shouted that this was bad and it became 0 because of Momo's cheating, while Momo was wrapped in shame and Zuma added why she even needed to cheat there. Because of this, Momo got angry at him and asked wasn't he just calling her badass, to which he replied that she was more like a lame ass, and asked if Momo had rolled triples, so Momo shouted that it was singles. If that's the case, Zuma said, she should hurry up and roll the double, so Momo silenced him and threw the die. It landed on 1, which irritated Zuma, so he tried to take the last die saying he would roll it, but Momo wouldn't let him and said to wait because she knew what she needed to do, to which Zuma argued that clearly, she didn't. Zuma managed to get the remaining die and threw it boastfully while shouting that this was how to roll dice, but despite his arrogance, it rolled a 2. So Momo started punching him while telling him to try saying again how to roll a die, while he apologized and reasoned that Momo's cheating had tainted everything. While they were still arguing about which of them was the lame ass, the scroll informed them that they had gotten 210 troops. The 210 troops they got appeared at the bottom of their stronghold, but compared to their enemy, it was just a tiny amount. So Momo commented that they got hardly anything there, to which Zuma added that this was better than nothing, while Momo noticed something else written on the scroll, so she said to wait. She read here that there were 4 jobs they could choose from to give to their 210 troops. There were knights who were strong against archers, archers who were strong against mages, mages who were stronger against warriors, and warriors who were stronger against knights. Here Zuma noticed that their game was like rock, paper, scissors, while Momo started giving jobs to their troops and divided them into 4 equal parts with 1 available job each and asked if Zuma thought this would work. Incidentally, it seemed they would also choose their own jobs, so she asked Zuma what he would take, to which Zuma decided to become a knight. They prepared here with their troops, and it looked like Momo chose the mage job, and they faced the multitude of enemy troops they would be up against. Soon after, Momo shouted for the troops to give it their all, and their goal was the crystal inside the castle, and she sent them charging while Zuma led the charge. The enemy troops were also charging at them, and the archers on the opposing side immediately rained arrows. So Momo shouted that they were coming and to cluster together and protect each other using their shields, which Zuma and their troops quickly did. The knights managed to block the enemy's rain of arrows and significantly reduce the damage they took, but this wasn't the same for the mages' situation. Momo shouted that they were taking major hits here and said that it was mentioned earlier that mages were a poor match against archers. Both sides continued to charge at each other, and Momo noticed here that the enemy's front line was made up of knights, so their front line should consist of warriors. She brought their army's warriors to the front, and because of this strategy, they easily defeated the multitude of knights in the enemy army. Momo shouted yes here due to excitement, and said that now she understood how this strategy worked. She explained here that since they had just put their warriors in front to gain an advantage, she expected their enemy to send mages to destroy their warriors, so in response, they needed to prepare their archers to counter their weaker mages, so these were the next ones she brought to the front. Momo's warriors gradually overpowered the enemy's knights, and as they did this, the enemy's mages slowly approached as a counter to their strategy. They prepared to use magic and waited for Momo's warriors to get closer. They began to cast, but because Momo had prepared for this, their archers rained arrows on the mages while they were still casting, disrupting them and killing them. While their archers were raining arrows, Momo ordered the warriors to stop and maintain a position where they couldn't be reached by spells. The warriors did this, and the enemy archers countered with a rain of arrows, which worried Momo, but she quickly ordered Zuma to charge the enemy archers, to which Zuma immediately responded. The enemy archers reloaded their arrows, but before they could release them again, Zuma had reached their side and kicked them, knocking them down. Zuma transformed here to strengthen himself, and other archers there tried to shoot him, but using his umbrella and shield, he managed to block them, and as a counterattack, he threw his shield at one part of the group of archers, knocking them down, and he quickly followed up with a javelin-like throw using his umbrella, which solidly hit a multitude of archers, knocking them too. Momo commented on how tough Zuma was, and that he was doing the work equivalent to a dozen people by himself. She said Momo was right to make Zuma the only knight because in that way, she could assign others to different classes. An enemy warrior charged at Zuma, but he managed to block its attack with his umbrella. However, he was surprised when it still managed to damage him. So Momo explained that he was a bad match for this because knights were weak against warriors, so he should dodge them as much as possible. Because the warriors from the other side were charging, Momo ordered their mages to attack and she joined them. And since warriors were weak against mages, they easily defeated the multitude of warriors charging at them. Momo was pleased because they had defeated 1/3 of their enemy and they had barely lost any. And when the other enemy knights started to charge, Momo brought their warriors to the front again. However, to her surprise, a behemoth started to charge there, and it sent a powerful foot stomp that sent them and some of their men flying. Momo was also hit by this and Zuma turned to look at her, and he immediately charged towards the behemoth while telling them to retreat. However, Zuma could do nothing when the beast sent a tusk attack at them, and he was forced to just block it. Zuma was shocked that even though he blocked, he saw that his life was halved because of that attack, and Momo had managed to stand up again and told Zuma to retreat, explaining that mages don't use that much stamina and that behemoth class was warrior. Momo shouted at their troops to attack while falling back and to avoid being hit by the behemoth's attacks as much as possible. However, when they did this, they started getting hit by a rain of arrows from the enemy archers, so Zuma explained that if they put too much distance between them and the enemies, they would be attacked by the enemy's archers. Momo ordered their warriors again to use their shields to defend the mages, and to hold out until they defeat the mega beasts they were facing. However, to Momo's surprise, something suddenly sent hell from the sky, and it turned out the dragon was responsible, and it started burning all their warriors using its fire breath. Momo was worried about this, but she quickly noticed that the dragon was mage class, so she ordered the archers to target it, while she also asked Zuma if he could do anything about the enemy archers, to which he replied that it wasn't easy because they were behind the warriors who were protecting them. Because of this, Momo shouted that this couldn't be, and their situation was really bad, and because of the number and monster allies of their enemy army, Momo's army was gradually being overpowered by them. Due to the dragon's flame breath, most of Momo's warriors were burned, and this marked the beginning of their formation's downfall. Momo shouted that they should just hold their ground, and at this rate they would be wiped out, and we can see that their limited troops were gradually being depleted. Zuma was hit by a behemoth which sent him flying and put his health points in jeopardy, and Momo saw here that they were down to 84 troops, which worried her. Inside the smoke of chaos, Momo saw a silhouette of a monster, and it turned out the enemy troops were charging directly at her, and as a behemoth was about to deliver a foot stomp to her, unexpectedly, a motorcycle suddenly used the warrior's shield as a ramp and hit the behemoth's face, completely knocking it down. Momo was surprised and turned to look behind her, and it turned out that Zuma's group had arrived along with other students from Renjaka High School, and they were quickly charging towards their enemy. The two big dudes shouted to their companions, asking where Zuma was, and that they would see here who was the toughest among them. Zuma's vice leader shouted asking if he was okay, while their companions were delighted that the phantom bike worked on the enemy while its owner was dismayed because his bike was destroyed. They took shields from the fallen warriors, and their giant companion ordered them to protect Momo, so Momo thanked him for this. When Zuma saw this, he was also surprised and commented that his crazy friends came in full force. While riding on their respective motorcycle bikes, those riding took out their respective bows and started raining arrows on the dragon, while saying to make sure they could ride it. A multitude of motorcycles surrounded the dragon and continued to attack while the dragon tried to counter using its fire breath, but Zuma's companions just shouted at it to come down and catch them because its fire wouldn't reach them from that height. Others seemed to turn into zombies as they started to swarm a behemoth while commenting on how big this frog was and that they should climb on its back, which made Momo shout that she had been telling them this wasn't a track meet. Before long, the delinquents managed to defeat one of the behemoths, and after that, they immediately went to the two remaining behemoths to take them down as well. On the other hand, those on motorcycles had already managed to defeat the dragon, so now they turned their focus to the remaining griffin, which made Momo shout that they were out of control there. She tried to stop them and said that they couldn't just charge in there without thinking and that they needed to consider the pairings. However, despite Momo's words, they continued to charge, and using their chosen jobs in the game, they easily destroyed the enemy troops. Momo was bewildered because she saw delinquent mages here, while Zuma told her not to think about it and that they were used to fighting. Momo was pleased because they had reversed the situation, and now only 102 remained of the enemies, while their allies had increased to 251. However, Zuma said, pointing out that the condition to clear this stage was that they needed to break the crystal inside the castle. Because of this, they both ran while Zuma said to leave this fight to their companions while they would break the crystal ball, to which Momo agreed and said that after that, they could go home. They entered the castle, and as soon as they entered, Zuma told Momo to be alert and that anything could jump out at them at the last minute, which slightly annoyed Momo, and she said she knew that. They walked into the hallway, and when they entered a room, they saw a crystal floating in the center of this room while being illuminated by a beam of light. Momo observed the surroundings and commented that it felt like they had entered another world, and she also wondered if the one in front of them was the crystal they needed to break. She also noticed that there seemed to be talismans attached to this crystal, so she told Zuma to wait, but Zuma didn't listen and said for her to step back as he would cut it, and it was time to destroy this crazy-ass world. Suddenly, someone shouted from behind them not to destroy it, but it was too late because Zuma had already cut this crystal in the middle, causing their eyes to widen in shock. When they both turned around, it turned out to be Okaroon while carrying Turbo Granny on his back, and a blush of joy was visible on Momo's face when she saw Okaroon, but instead of being happy to see them, Turbo Granny shouted at them to run. The castle began to crumble after Zuma cut the crystal, alarming those inside. They immediately ran to avoid being crushed by the falling rubble. Zuma commented that he thought they had cleared the game, to which Okaroon replied that they shouldn't have done that and it wasn't supposed to end, which confused Momo. Turbo Granny explained that this wasn't a board game but a cursed wicker trunk, trapping an evil yokai inside through a curse, with the box serving as a sealed cage. Zuma was surprised that Turbo Granny could speak, as they perceived her as a cat, which irritated Turbo Granny. Meanwhile, Okaroon asked Momo if Zuma was her companion here, to which Momo agreed. Momo then called out to Turbo Granny and asked if the crystal was the only thing they shouldn't have broken. Turbo Granny shook her head and explained that there should have been 4 seals in this place. As she said this, Momo remembered the card with 4 large circles symbolizing their targets, and she realized they had destroyed all those seals, which angered Turbo Granny, who explained that the beings they defeated were guardian deities keeping the yokai imprisoned. Momo reasoned that the cursed wicker trunk was set up like a game, seemingly inviting them to finish it, to which Turbo Granny shouted that that was precisely the point. Upon exiting the castle, a congratulatory tab appeared, indicating they had cleared all stages, and the items Momo and her friends wore from the game began to disappear. Zuma's friends cheered because they had finished the game, while others wondered where the music was coming from and commented on how easy it had been. Momo asked Turbo Granny again what was sealed in this place, to which she replied that she didn't know, but if they used a cursed trunk, they could be sure it would bring real trouble. After the congratulatory tab vanished, various cards appeared with carved creepy faces, eyes with feet, ears with 6 fingers, noses and mouths full of mustaches, all connected to a black vine-like thing. This strange creature spoke, thanking them because, thanks to them, it was finally free again, and told them how much it loved them. Turbo Granny immediately shouted for everyone to close their eyes, which confused them, so she explained not to look at that creature. She said it was the fairy tale card, and it had the ability to take over anything who looked at it. The fairy tale card recognized Turbo Granny and commented that she seemed to have changed, asking if she was on the human side now, to which Turbo Granny called the creature Asswipe, while saying it seemed to have taken over the cursed trunk. Apparently, it couldn't destroy the seal on its own, so it turned the trunk into a board game to get other people to break the seals for it. Momo was irritated and asked how they could get out of there, and the fairy tale card answered that none of them could leave because once they entered the cursed trunk, they could never escape. Momo shouted that it was lying because the old guy and one woman had gotten out of here, so the fairy tale card explained that it had allowed those to leave because people who wouldn't play the game were useless to it. Because if they were outside, they could lure many other people into that game, as all they needed to do was tell others about what they saw inside the board game. Those people approached this game with various motives, some out of curiosity and others to save their friends. Momo then said that if they couldn't get out by themselves, the creature should hurry up and do it for them. So the fairy tale card asked if they really wanted to leave the wonderful world it had created. It thought they would be pleased here, so it had prepared all that sugar, believing humans had a dependence on sugar. Momo objected and shouted that she wanted crab and ramen, and that this shitty world was incredibly boring. The creature asked if what she was saying was true, and explained that while it might be true for her, what about the others? The creature wondered how many humans here wanted to return to real society. It pondered how many had been hurt by their families, treated as defective by society, and driven to the margins like garbage. While saying this, we were shown a memory of Zuma's vice leader being beaten and humiliated inside the men's bathroom. In fact, it said that those people despised the real world and wanted to make the real world chaotic. Because some of Zuma's friends didn't close their eyes, the fairy tale card gained control over their bodies, and it immediately ordered Zuma's vice leader to charge at him. Zuma peeked to see what was happening, but unexpectedly, his vice leader struck him on the head with a steel bar, causing a cut on his left eyebrow, which alarmed Momo. The force of his friend's blow made him clutch his bleeding head, and when he looked at it, the appearance of what he was seeing seemed to change, looking like a woman with a card for a head. His eyes widened at this, and the fairy tale card began speaking to him, saying that he in particular had lovely eyes and pointed that he wished to destroy the world and leave it in ruins. After conversing with the creature, he suddenly lost himself and began transforming into a frightening form while being possessed by the fairy tale card. Zuma seemed to become a rampaging monster as he began to shout loudly and transform, while concern was visible on the faces of Momo and Turbo Granny. Zuma produced an umbrella, and the force of its opening sent everyone around him flying, but fortunately, Okaroon and Momo embraced each other while Turbo Granny managed to grab onto Okaroon's clothes. As they were being blown away by Zuma, Momo asked him what he was doing. Turbo Granny commented, wondering why that bastard was here, drawing their attention. She asked Momo if she couldn't use her powers, to which Momo replied that she couldn't do it unless she had the gold ball, which made Okaroon turn to her and ask where it was now, and she answered that Zuma had it and they needed to get it back. After Zuma's transformation, he commented that with what he had obtained here, he could now leave this cursed trunk, and using this power, he would make it rain blood all over the world. Then Zuma brought out his umbrella weapon and wrapped it around his body like a cloak. Momo was shocked and quickly asked their companions if they didn't have cards like hers, and if so, they should choose the card that could turn them to stone. Zuma sent out an extraordinary wind force attack by opening his umbrella body, but fortunately, the delinquents managed to grab the rock-hard Costanus card and transform their bodies into stone, yet the strength of the fairy tale card's attack still sent them flying. The stone bodies of the delinquents were scattered about, but luckily, they didn't break. So when they returned to normal, they were impressed by what happened and commented on how wild those cards were. Okaroon remarked that Zuma's umbrella attack power was extraordinary and likened it to a cannon, to which Momo added that their situation had become worse because Zuma was so powerful. At first, Okaroon thought it had no weaknesses, so Momo explained that yes, it was super strong, but it could only open its umbrella twice. Because of this, Momo noticed that Zuma had already opened his umbrella twice, so the remaining chance to open it was just once, and Turbo Granny added that this was the power of the fairy tale card they were fighting against. Turbo Granny explained that it could draw out the maximum power of any human it possessed, and she used Okaroon as an example, saying it could let Okaroon go all out any number of times. But she was sure they had realized that if they used that ability repeatedly, it could destroy one's body, so at this rate, the possessed Zuma would surely become compost. Zuma prepared to use his special move again, and as the powerful air burst was about to explode, Momo quickly asked Okaroon and Turbo Granny if they had cards like hers, to which the two agreed, so she told them to choose the card that turned them to stone. They immediately grabbed the rock-hard Costanus and turned to stone before Zuma's attack hit them, and the impact of the wind sent them flying. It also managed to crack Momo's stone body, and when she returned to her normal form, she suffered a scratch on her shoulder. Okaroon worried about this while she winced in pain and couldn't believe that even the rock form could be damaged. The possessed Zuma caught Momo's attention as he laughed and commented on how wonderful this was, and she saw that Zuma's face was bloodied inside his monster suit, causing her to cry out in concern. She remembered a time when they were walking in Ice Town, and as they walked, they were talking, and Zuma stared at her, and after that, she commented that he really was a bird brain, and shouted not to let that monster manipulate him like this. She told him to look at his friends who came for him, and that the Zuma she knew wasn't the kind of person who could hurt them. As the possessed Zuma continued his rampage, Momo took out the Carmine card and brought out the Dark Knight sword and shield, beginning to charge at Zuma while shouting for this piece of shit to wake up. The fairy tale card replied that it wasn't manipulating Zuma or anything in the same way, and that this was his own destructive impulse. Momo stopped running and was shocked by what she learned, and the monster added that it was Zuma's desire to destroy this world, to destroy her and everything else. All the fairy tale card did, it said, was to ask him to be his true self and express his feelings. Zuma suddenly appeared above Momo, ready to unleash his special umbrella move again while commenting "Oh les miserables," so Okaroon quickly ran towards Momo, telling her to use the stone card, but as Momo was pulling it out of her pocket, she dropped it. Zuma's wind attack struck forcefully where Momo was standing, causing a large cloud of smoke in the surroundings, but fortunately, Okaroon managed to reach Momo, and they, along with Turbo Granny, transformed into stone. After enduring Zuma's attack, Okaroon's stone body also cracked, resulting in a scratch on his left shoulder when he returned to normal. As they fell to the ground, while standing up, he asked the prostrate Momo if she was okay because they needed to run and couldn't defeat Zuma inside the game. However, when Okaroon looked closely at what had happened to Momo, he saw that she had a large gash from her left shoulder to her right ribs, causing his eyes to widen in concern and immediately cry out Momo's name in fear of what had happened to her. Okaroon said here that this couldn't be and asked what about Momo's cards. Zuma, on the other hand, prepared to launch another attack while saying the words "Jean Valjean," which worried Okaroon and he shouted to wait, then picked up Momo and shouted again at Zuma that he was a dumb jerk. Zuma released his air burst attack towards the two, but fortunately, Okaroon managed to run away from the trajectory of the attack while carrying Momo. The fairy tale card asked if they could hear the people singing, to which Okaroon just shouted that after all he had done to find Momo, what was Zuma doing? Zuma didn't listen to him and just sent another attack, which forced Okaroon to transform himself into stone. Due to the strength of the air attack, it still managed to create a large crack in his stone body on the back, and when he returned to normal, he sustained a large cut on his back, causing him to trip while running. He winced in pain and got irritated, saying that if he could only use his powers here, he would be able to run. While still on the ground, the monster came back again and pointed his umbrella at them while again saying the words "Jean Valjean," which worried him. Okaroon quickly took his cards from his pocket, but when he reached for them, he was surprised that they were no longer in his hands, and it turned out he had dropped them when they fell earlier. Zuma prepared again to use his special move while showing interest in Les Miserables, and Okaroon quickly shielded Momo's head to protect her from the incoming attack on both of them. Zuma released his air burst attack, but fortunately, a convenience store countertop suddenly appeared and blocked the attack, which surprised Zuma.
Huh?
The one who created it commented that he had finally caught up with them, and it turned out that Rokuro was responsible for this, and he commented that he hoped they would tell him about any part-time work with good pay, while Okarun was very surprised to see him and asked what he was doing here. So he explained that he had just seen them earlier running from Bega the demon, and while he was chasing them in hopes of getting a lead on a new part-time job, he ended up here. Turbo Granny shouted beside them while throwing the cards on the ground, asking why Okarun didn't tell her how to return to normal. She said she just turned around for a moment and now Momo was like this, and that she would treat her wound, and asked where did Okarun put the bag they were carrying. Someone else spoke behind them, asking if this was a dream or if it was really happening, and what was this place, but he quickly said never mind because there was no point in thinking about it anymore. It turned out that Bega had arrived there, and said that in any case, they were all under arrest. Okarun was very surprised when he saw him, while Turbo Granny commented that this cop was a pain in the ass. The monster said that the police officer had no role in this, and shouted Javert, while preparing to send his air attack, which they managed to dodge. Because of what he saw, Bega asked which of them had the cannon there because it was dangerous, and while pulling out his revolver, he shouted that now it was legitimate self-defense for him to do this, and he started charging at Zuma while shooting at him with his weapon. Fairy Tail Card easily blocked it using Zuma's umbrella, but Zuma's body condition inside him was getting worse and worse, so Fairy Tail Card was surprised that it was floundering because of a mere policeman. Rokuro, on the other hand, sent a laser beam using the barcode scanner, so Bega commented that he was a convenience store clerk but had a gun, and because of that, he was under arrest. So Rokuro pointed out that this wasn't a gun but a high-output particle beam, which made him even more under arrest. When his particle beam hit Zuma's umbrella, it seemed to hit a body as well because blood splattered there, and Zuma's body was also being beaten in the process, so the Fairy Tail Card commented that the direct hit seemed too much. Because of this, the possessed Zuma decided to propel himself away from them, which Okarun noticed. When he reached a point in the air, he quickly released his cannon-like air attack, and he propelled himself again after that, and after changing position after position, he released multiple air burst attack in the middle of it. Okarun said he was like a rocket, while Turbo Granny pointed out that Umbrella Boy was a sweet yokai by nature, but when forced to fight, nothing could stop him. The possessed Zuma repeatedly performed his dash and mid-air strike maneuver, and because of that, he overpowered Rokuro and Bega's defense, sending the two flying. Okarun was worried about the two when he saw what happened, while Turbo Granny was biting on a cloth in extreme frustration while saying that those blockheads were no match for that being, and as a yokai, that Umbrella Boy was not a pushover. Okarun started running sideways while carrying Momo and Turbo Granny, and she was telling him to get his family jewel from Zuma because if he got it, he could use his powers. So Okarun asked how he was supposed to do that because he couldn't fight him using his regular body, to which Turbo Granny shouted not to ask her and that he should figure it out himself. Turbo Granny jumped down from his arms and said she would contact Rin and that it was too noisy here so she wouldn't be able to hear anything she said. While Turbo Granny was running away from the scene, she shouted at Okarun to hurry up and blow their enemy away because he was the only one who could defeat Zuma. While Rokuro and Bega were fighting Zuma, Okarun went to the stronghold stairs to lay down the injured Momo. Okarun looked back at the battle and after adjusting his glasses, he quickly ran towards the three, but while running, he thought about how slow he was and that he hadn't realized how much he relied on the power of the curse until now. He said it was terrifying because how could he get his family jewel from that monster when it was flying around in the air, and neither Rokuro nor Bega could damage it, and he was no match for it in his flesh and blood form. He remembered Momo and how she defeated the leader alien using her risky plan, and here he thought that Momo always turned their situation around no matter how bad it was, so he thought that if she were awake now, she might have come up with something. While he was running, let's go to Rokuro and Bega, where Bega said he had run out of bullets so this convenience store man should come up with a plan, to which Rokuro replied that he wasn't useful. Bega told him that his gun was useless here and asked if there was no way to stop that creature they were fighting from moving like that. So Rokuro answered that he didn't know and explained that it moved and attacked using shock waves from opening and closing its umbrella. So in simple terms, Zuma was using air resistance. So if they could remove the air, they could stop its movement, to which Bega shouted that it seemed impossible. And while they were talking, Okarun had caught up with them. They all ran together and Okarun told Rokuro to make himself into a rocket and asked if he couldn't transform into many things using his nanoskin. To which Rokuro replied that he could transform, but he didn't have enough nanoskin. So all he could do was make a jetpack. Bega was telling Okarun to stay away from here because this place was dangerous, and Okarun shouted at what Rokuro said, asking if wouldn't that help. Rokuro made a jetpack and said he would try it. So he quickly flew towards Zuma, but was quickly toppled in the air, which left Okarun dumbfounded while commenting that that was useless. Because of this, they just continued running and Rokuro said that Zuma was wrapped in air, and he couldn't get close when he's in the sky, which made Bega ask if that meant nothing could land on that creature. Okarun suddenly thought of something here and immediately ordered Rokuro to make a heater that could heat up their entire area. So Rokuro asked if it was because he was cold, which made Okarun shout at him to just do it. Because of this, Rokuro transformed his body into a box-type heater and put some cords on Okarun and Bega's bodies, which made Okarun ask what this was. So he explained that he didn't have enough power by himself, but if he used the power of all three of them, he could produce stupendous power. He explained that the heat they produced by running is being vented from his heater and providing a powerful warmth. Bega asked what the point of all this was, so Okarun said he didn't know if this would work, but he would try anything he could think of because if Momo were here, this is what she would do. No matter how outlandish their idea might be, he would do it. Before long, the possessed Zuma suddenly lost control of his flight and attacks, so he wondered what was happening, and soon he was being blown away by a sudden wind. Okarun commented that he better let go of the umbrella he's holding, which caught his attention, and when he turned to him, he added that the warmed-up surface area was being lifted all at once by Fairy Tale Card's gust of wind, creating a tornado. A large tornado began to form behind them and sucked in the possessed Zuma. Zuma was thrown off due to the strength of the tornado, and when he fell to the ground, Bega immediately ran towards him and kicked his umbrella away from his hand. As a counter, Zuma tried to deliver a high kick to him, but he managed to block it with his arm. However, due to the impact of the kick, his nose still bled and his arm guard was shattered. Zuma then took his Geta sandals and put them on his hands, and when he was about to hit Bega, Rokuro arrived and prevented it from happening, and as a counter, Rokuro used 6 sense organs on him. But even though it hit Zuma point blank, it didn't even make him step back, which amazed Rokuro at his defense. While still distracted, Zuma punched him in the face, sending him flying, and as a cover-up attack, Bega charged in with his police baton, and when Zuma was about to rush him, Okarun suddenly hugged him so Bega managed to hit Zuma in the face with his police baton. But unexpectedly, Zuma's umbrella moved on its own and hit him like a rocket. When he fell, the umbrella changed targets and hit Okarun in the back while he was hugging Zuma, which also knocked him down, and after that, Zuma sat on his umbrella while it was on Okarun's back. After that, Zuma released his air blast point blank at Okarun, which destroyed their surroundings, and the shockwave from the impact reached Rokuro and Bega. Zuma lifted his umbrella and wore it again like a cloak, and suddenly commented on who this was and why he had such kind of power. Behind the smoke of the battle, there was a glowing circle, and it turned out to be Okarun who had transformed into his Turbo Granny cursed form because he had retrieved his family jewel from the monster. After Okarun and Zuma exchanged glances, Okarun said he needed a moment to hide his family jewel. As soon as he pocketed the golden ball, he and Zuma swiftly moved to charge at each other, resulting in a contest of speed. While performing his air maneuver, Fairy Tale Card asked how Okarun was able to use Turbo Granny's powers, to which Okarun replied while dodging that he wouldn't tell him. It then attempted to deliver a low kick while saying that Okarun lacked love, which Okarun easily evaded while saying that he had hurt Momo. But unexpectedly, the monster suddenly threw his Geta sandal at the side of his face, and upon catching it, he punched him in the face with it, sending him flying. The possessed Zuma's umbrella flew in front of him and unleashed an air cannon attack, while the fairy tale card said that it wasn't responsible for this. Okarun managed to dodge Zuma's air burst attack while commenting that he was really going all out, and possessed Zuma continued to charge while saying that these were Zuma's destructive impulses and that he wanted to destroy the world. When Zuma threw a punch at him, Okarun managed to dodge by lying on the ground, and as a counter, he kicked him hard into the air, and while performing a combo, he commented that this was depressing and that he would go all out too. However, when he jumped to follow up his combo, Zuma managed to dodge him using his umbrella, and while flying through the air, he commented that it was a bad idea to jump so quickly because now he wanted to target his genitals. Zuma charged quickly like a rocket towards Okarun, but before he could make contact, Okarun managed to stop him with his powerful legs, which surprised him, and Okarun ominously said that now he was trapped. Nevertheless, as a counter, the possessed Zuma unleashed his air burst attack again, sending Okarun flying to the ground, and upon landing, Zuma prepared to launch another attack while commenting on how impudent Okarun was because Turbo Granny could only crawl on the ground, so he couldn't defeat Umbrella Boy. Several debris began to fly around him, which puzzled him and made him think a super being was responsible, but it turned out to be just Rokuro, and while controlling them, he replied that it was just a convenience store clerk doing this. He directed a multitude of debris towards Zuma, who commented that he hated convenience store clerks like Rokuro, and as a counter, he used his air burst attack on him, forcing Rokuro to run. As the attack continued, possessed Zuma said they had no hope here and they were no match for Umbrella Boy. Okarun quickly moved above him and said he only needed to reach him with his feet, and due to the speed of the event, Zuma couldn't react, and Okarun's axe kick solidly hit his head, shattering it and sending him flying and bouncing on the ground. Okarun's attack didn't end there, and as Zuma bounced, Okarun quickly charged again and, using his all-out attack, delivered a double kick to possessed Zuma's body that was so powerful it created a shockwave. He was sent flying towards the stronghold, and due to the force of the impact, he managed to destroy a small part of the wall. Zuma didn't move after that attack, so Okarun returned to normal and wondered if he had defeated him. It started to rain in the area, which puzzled him, and he suddenly heard someone speaking near Zuma, saying to stop bullying his brother. A child holding an umbrella appeared next to Zuma, and suddenly a scene of two young siblings holding hands emerged, causing Okarun to ask what this was, and he also saw the same children where the older of the two seemed to be running while it was raining. Bega arrived on the scene and shouted Zuma's name, asking if he was Unji. He seemed unable to believe what was happening and asked what he was doing in that place of all places. Bega said he had been looking for Zuma for a long time. Okarun continued to see the child, telling him not to bully his brother, which made him wonder how this was happening, and he also saw a scene where the two siblings were holding hands while looking at a river. In the next scene, we delve into Zuma's past, explaining why Okarun is seeing these visions. It was shown that from a young age, they had lost their father. After mourning the loss of their father, they went with their mother to his office to speak with his bosses. His mother complained to the higher-ups that it was clear her husband had been overworked, which led to this outcome, to which they merely responded that it was her husband's own negligence that caused his death and that he was the one who wanted to work overtime, while another asked if he regularly serviced his moped. This angered their mother, who shouted that a man had died and they were trying to blame him for his own death, so Unji covered his brother's ears to shield them from hearing this argument. After that, we moved to their rented apartment, where Unji's mother was pleading with the landlords, promising to pay next month, to which one angrily replied that she always said the same thing, so she should stop it, and that they wanted them to leave. So Unji's mother reasoned that she had children, but the man just said that it had nothing to do with them and that she had chosen to have them. While this was happening, Unji and his brother were reading a storybook, and his brother asked Unji if they could fly to the sky using an umbrella, to which Unji smiled and replied that he didn't know. In the next scene, we move to a beautiful morning where Unji's brother was walking along the riverside wearing boots and carrying an umbrella. As he was walking, suddenly a child kicked him in the back, causing him to fall face first, and they started laughing at him along with their companions. They taunted him, saying how weird he was for always wearing rubber boots and carrying an umbrella even when it wasn't raining. When Unji's brother raised his head, it was revealed that he had been hurt badly from the fall and his forehead had started bleeding, but he quickly grabbed his umbrella and happily raised it despite what had happened. One of the bullies tried to take his umbrella, but suddenly someone kicked the child in the face, knocking him down, and it turned out to be Unji. Unji scared them off, causing them to run away from them, and as they were running, his brother called out to him, still with a bleeding forehead, and asked if he was jealous of his umbrella. After that, we moved to a rainy day, where Unji's brother was still happily walking along the riverside, even though he was struggling due to the strong wind accompanying the rain. Unfortunately, the wind started to blow his umbrella in the opposite direction, and due to his small and weak body, it was blown towards the river and he couldn't reach it anymore. We then suddenly moved to Unji running, with intense worry and concern visible on his face. He ran as fast as he could, but when he arrived at the riverside, it was too late, and all he found were the first responders attending to the lifeless body of his brother. He was stunned by what he saw on this tragic night, and after some time, he told his mother about it, and they mourned the death together. While holding the remaining memento of his brother, the rubber boots, he remembered his smile as he held his umbrella while walking along the riverside. After that, we moved to a scene where Unji was being held at the wrist by his mother and being pulled somewhere, so that made Unji wonder. It turned out she had brought him to an amusement park, and here they had fun and rode various rides like the merry-go-round, jet spinner, and Ferris wheel. Afterwards, they ate delicious ice cream, and the joy was visible on his mother's face as she watched him happily eating. As night fell, they also watched the amusement park's fireworks show, and they saw colorful designs painting the sky. However, despite all the joy they experienced on this day, it was actually a situation like a last meal when you're sentenced to death because Unji's mother tried to pull him along in her unaliving attempt by throwing themselves in front of a moving train. It turns out this was the scene he saw before being possessed by the fairy tale card, and here his mother had gone insane due to all the bad things that had happened in her life, and in response, she had decided to end it all. Crying profusely, Unji tried to remove his mother's grip from his arm to avoid being splattered, and fortunately, he managed to do so, but he couldn't stop his mother from ending her life. In the next scene, we see Zuma frowning, and it seems like a man is introducing him to other children. It looks like one of them is about to shake his hand. Fast forward a bit, we see Zuma getting punched in the face. The boy who punched him said he didn't like how Zuma looked at him, and his companion added that Zuma's face makes him sick. They also said that from that point on, Zuma would be on toilet duty, and they ordered him to do the weeding. Because of the punch, Zuma was left crying with a bloody nose. Someone asked him what was with the rebellious look in his eyes, saying his face was the problem. They also said Zuma should be more obedient. Moreover, they said Zuma had no social awareness, so what was happening to him was his own fault. At that moment, Zuma wondered what was wrong with this shitty, effed up world, and he saw some bricks nearby, which he picked up and used to hit the bullies. In the next scene, Zuma has grown older and is punching a man while saying he'll smash it to pieces. He's part of a fist fight happening under a bridge, and he told his opponents that they're under his umbrella now, and if they disobey him, they'll die. One of Zuma's companions said they were done there, and according to Zuma, they should draft more troops because they're starting a war. Then, they surrounded a police car, hitting it with various objects. One policeman said they were nothing but trash, while another was calling for backup on the radio. A policeman got out of the car, saying not to underestimate them, but his companions said to wait for backup. At that moment, someone kicked the policeman who got out of the car, and it was Zuma who did it, punching the policeman in the face. Zuma was thinking about his brother's death, which made his punches more intense due to anger, and he also thought about how his mom passed, so the policeman was really in a bad situation. However, another policeman grabbed him by the shoulder, slammed him to the ground, and put handcuffs on him. The backup arrived, and Zuma and his companions were arrested at 10:33 p.m. We learned that one of the policemen there was Officer Bega, who said they were arresting Zuma for interfering with the duties of a public official. Zuma told the police, "Screw you," and said he'd remember him. The police left the crime scene, and took Zuma to Camago police station, where Zuma gave Officer Bega a deep look. They locked Zuma in a cell without even a bed, and the police discussed what happened to his family. Bega was reading Zuma's file, and someone said Zuma was placed in an orphanage but ran away after an incident that resulted in injuries, and he ended up joining a group of delinquents and drifted from place to place. An old man added that after a few years in that place, Zuma might be reformed to a degree, and Bega asked what would happen after that. The man replied that he didn't know, but the government provides support for children under 18, so he expected Zuma would return. In the next scene, a man is coming out the institution, and it's Zuma, who seems to have noticed something. He saw a man who seemed to be waiting for him, and it was Officer Bega, whom Zuma immediately recognized. Then, we move to another place, and it seems Zuma recognizes it. It's Bega's house, where he took Zuma, who asked what was happening and if Bega was playing with him. Bega told Zuma to come in and told him he would be his guardian now, which seemed to surprise Zuma. Bega showed Zuma where his room was and told him not to enter it. However, Zuma asked who would live with someone like Bega, and Bega asked if Zuma wasn't happy unless he lived with his mom, which seemed to annoy Zuma. He entered the house wearing his shoes and said, "Bring it on." So Bega told him to take off his shoes. Zuma said he remembered Bega's face and had wanted to kill him for a long time, so he was about to punch him, but Bega quickly took him down and tied him up with a jacket. Bega said Zuma could only do that in his dreams, so he better keep working on it. In the next scene, we see a family leaving a fair, and we learn that it's Zuma's family. It turns out this is just Zuma's dream, and suddenly a pillow is thrown at his head. Bega said it was morning, and Zuma is angry because Bega woke him up so early, saying it's not even 5 a.m. yet. We see prepared food: rice, soup, vegetables, and salmon. Zuma stares at it, while Bega gives thanks for the food. The two eat, and Bega tells Zuma to give thanks, but Zuma tells him to get bent. Because of this, Zuma receives an incredibly hard slap, and he says it hurts. Bega says he already told Zuma to give thanks, and Zuma replies that he wasn't joking. Zuma is angry, so he stands up to leave, saying he can't take this bullshit. So Bega asks if he's running away. Zuma turns around because of this, and Bega says Zuma gives up quickly, so Zuma stops trying to leave. Zuma sits at the table to eat again, and suddenly he kicks the table towards Bega, causing the food to fly everywhere. Bega gets angry because a lot of food was wasted, and Zuma says he won't listen to anything Bega says. Then, we see Bega brushing his teeth, and Zuma tries to hit him from behind, but Bega senses he's there and kicks him. Next, Zuma tries to ambush Bega at the door, but Bega kicks the door very hard, trapping Zuma. Zuma also tries to ambush Bega from above, but Bega's senses are strong, so he punches Zuma. When night comes, Zuma listens at the wall of Bega's room to know if he's asleep. When he hears nothing, he slowly goes to Bega's room, and when he peeks in, he confirms that Bega is asleep. He was about to hit Bega with an umbrella, but he saw Bega's notebook with a picture of his family. Zuma seems to feel guilty about what he was going to do, so he didn't continue and left the room. We're shown prepared food again. Bega gives thanks for the food, and Zuma just stares at him, then asked Bega why he adopted him if he had a family. Bega answered that they're dead because one day, his wife took their child to school, and on the way, they were stabbed by a man. The man said he did it because of anger towards society, and he wanted revenge on this rotting world. He said he wanted to kill people who looked happy to make them understand. Bega said he thought about killing the man and killing himself, and he still thinks about doing it, but whenever he's close to doing it, his child's face appears, saying she also wanted to become an officer when she grows up, and called Bega a hero who fights for justice. Bega added that, as the man said, there's no hope for their rotting world, but if they just neglect it, they've already lost. He said the world will just become more twisted, and in the end, it will become a hell that people can't live in. Bega added that he doesn't want to be defeated by this world, so he adopted Zuma, because even though things are difficult sometimes, they can't forget kindness and compassion, and they need to live with care. Then, he told Zuma he would protect him, and Zuma suddenly remembered his sibling. Zuma asked what Bega knew, saying shithead adults blamed his mother for his father's death, and he was bullied at school just because he was poor. In the end, His mother offed herself, planning to take him with her. Zuma also said no one helped them, and people like Bega and their society rejected him. Then, Zuma stood up, saying adults can go straight to hell, and he left, while Bega did nothing and just continued eating. In the next scene, we see it's raining, and Zuma goes to the place where his sibling died, seemingly deep in thought. Zuma lingered at the place where his brother died, despite the rain, and he remembered his little brother smiling at him. Before long, he left, and he heard someone shouting, "Give it back." So he turned to see where it came from. He saw a child being bullied by his companions, and the bully took something made by the child's mother. They passed around the object, which had a frog design, and they continued to laugh at him while he cried. At that moment, Zuma noticed something, a dead frog with its head cut off. Then, he remembered the deaths of his father and brother, and how his mother offed herself, wanting to take him with her. Zuma was visibly affected by this and left. Let's return to the children, where one bully threw the bullied child's possession into the river. Someone told the child to forget about it, saying that the child's mother would make a new one, so they should go. The child stared at the river where the item made by his mother was thrown, and suddenly Zuma heard a splash of water, so he turned to look. He noticed the bullies running somewhere, and the child drowning due to the strong current, which reminded him of how his sibling died. The river carried the child away due to the strong current, and Zuma just stood there stunned, as if telling someone to stop. The other children were worried about the drowning child, who seemed to have gone under completely. At that moment, someone arrived on a bicycle and told Zuma to call the fire department. That person was the police officer who had adopted Zuma, and he jumped into the river to save the child, causing Zuma to worry about him. The officer grabbed the drowning child and lifted him up so he could breathe, even though he himself couldn't breathe. While doing this, he thought about what his daughter had told him before, that he was a hero who fights for justice. Moreover, he remembered how he used to carry his daughter, and he said to himself that he wouldn't stand for defeat, and he wouldn't let people die, so this child must live. As he was saying this, his vision gradually darkened, suggesting to us that he was losing consciousness. Zuma called the officer an idiot, saying he would get himself killed, and begged him to stop while running towards him. He remembered the officer's promise to protect him, so he shouted not to kill any more people, as if talking to someone or something of a higher being. When he reached the riverbank, he saw his little brother, which surprised him, and he asked if Unji was jealous of his umbrella. Then, it changed form into a creature with one eye and one leg, wearing Geta sandals. It said it would lend Zuma its umbrellas. After that, the creature merged with Zuma, turning him into the umbrella boy, and he flew above the river. We see that the wind grew stronger, blowing away the children's umbrellas, and the river's waves intensified, submerging the officer and the child. We're also shown the time when Unji's brother asked him if they can fly with an umbrella, and it seems the bullied child appeared slightly. In the next scene, Zuma picked up the child, while his second umbrella lifted the officer to save him. Then, the river seemed to calm down, and the officer coughed up water, so someone said he had awakened. He saw Zuma standing in front of him, with the children behind. Moreover, the child he tried to save was also alive. Then Zuma fell to his knees, and both of them was relieved they were alive, while an image of Unji's little brother was shown. In the next scene, we see a rice field, and the police officer asks Zuma how he saved him, but Zuma replies that he already said he wouldn't tell. He says he won't share the story with someone who suddenly jumps into rivers. According to the officer, when someone is drowning, they only have 10 seconds, and their head needs to be brought out of the water immediately. Zuma then asked what's the point of doing that if the rescuers end up drowning too. The two seem to be traveling, and they arrive at a cemetery. Their purpose there is to visit the Zuma family grave, and Zuma thanks the officer for it, saying he made a beautiful grave for his family. They left an umbrella and boots there for Zuma's brother, and both paid their respects to the family. Then, Zuma said that his family never had money, and all of his brother's belongings were hand-me-downs from him, who was named Futa. Nevertheless, his mother took pity on Futa and bought him an umbrella and boots. Futa was overjoyed with their mother's gift, so he carried them wherever he went, even on sunny days. No matter how bad things got, Fuda always had a huge smile on his face, which lifted Zuma's spirit. He added that for him and his mother, Fuda's presence was like the sun. So when Fuda died, his mother just gave up. Zuma added that he wasn't enough for his mother. He was sobbing heavily, while saying he should have been the one in his brother's place. At that moment, the officer seemed to pity Zuma and held his head to comfort him. He told Zuma that won't do, and he couldn't die. He asked if Zuma understood that, while looking at his family's grave. The two left, and in the next scene, we see prepared food. Someone appears to be praying, and both Zuma and the officer give thanks for their meal. After that, we return to the present, and Momo wakes up in tears. She's struggling to stand and calling Zuma's name. Meanwhile, Okarun, Officer Bega, and Rokuro are occupied with the fight. The fairy tale card asks them what they think they're doing, and we see that it's also holding Zuma. It calls the three fools and attacks them with its tendrils. It adds that they're denying Umbrella Boy's freedom to wreak havoc. The officer tells Zuma to hold on, saying they'll open his eyes. If Zuma is still confused, he'll hit him to knock some sense into him. He tells Zuma to come back and not let the fairy tale card defeat him. At that moment, Zuma seems to be returning and calls out to the officer. However, he's still controlled by the fairy tale card, which says this isn't good while Zuma keeps calling for the officer. Then, the fairy tale card uses the Umbrella Boy's umbrella to jump up, saying it can't let the officer get close to Zuma because its mind control over Zuma is too strong. It bids farewell, saying it's leaving the cursed trunk, so Okarun calls it a coward and tells it not to escape. Then, Momo arrives and Okarun asks if she's okay, saying she shouldn't overexert herself. Momo apologizes while crying, saying it's her fault because she undid all the seals. Because of this, the fairy tale card can leave that place, while they all remain trapped. Okarun tells her not to apologize, saying if he were in her position, he would have done the same. Everything will be okay, and they'll find a way to sort it out, and he promises that they will get Zuma back too. He also apologizes for taking so long to get there, so Momo just said okay, and cried. Turbo Granny arrives and asks the two what they're doing standing there, calling them shitheads. She says she's not the only one forced to do the work there, and Zuma's classmates are with her. Okarun asks if Turbo Granny contacted the class rep, and Momo seems surprised. Okarun explains that she's on standby, and Momo says it's too dangerous, asking why they brought her. Turbo Granny replies that it's so they can leave the cursed trunk, and Momo sees that Turbo Granny has a Serpo phone on her forehead. She calls Rin using it, who answers that she can hear Turbo Granny. She says they're ready, and we see that the ground is full of talismans. Rin asked what she should do next, and Turbo Granny replied to place the cursed trunk on top of the black cloth, warning her not to topple it. Then, once Rin places it on the cloth, she'll be able to touch the cursed trunk, and only then retrieve the figurines from inside. Turbo Granny instructed Rin to do it slowly and not to damage them, as even the smallest crack could kill the person represented. Rin then asked how they would move the cursed trunk onto the cloth without touching it, as they would be pulled inside if they did. Moreover, the bench was fixed to the floor, so they couldn't move it. So what should they do? A woman wearing a bike helmet suggested holding the cursed trunk with tree branches to avoid direct contact, and she was already doing so. However, Turbo Granny stopped them, saying not to touch the cursed trunk with sticks, and we see that the woman with the bike helmet disappeared. Rin said Turbo Granny should have told them that earlier because a woman was pulled inside. Turbo Granny called them shit for brains in response. Then, she asked Rin if she had any black cords, like those used to tie packages. They could use those to lift the cursed trunk, and Rin said she would try. However, Turbo Granny didn't allow Rin to do it, as she couldn't risk being pulled into the cursed trunk too. When Rin asked what they should do, Turbo Granny said she'd have Mai do it, which Rin couldn't believe. Turbo Granny explained that Mai was a yokai, so she had resistance to curses, and if Mai used the black cords, she wouldn't be pulled into the cursed trunk. Rin instructed Mai on how to move the cursed trunk, but Mai refused to do it. Turbo Granny, angered, said she'd kill Mai, and Mai replied that she wouldn't take orders from Turbo Granny. Rin told her this wasn't the time to worry about that, as everyone was in danger. Mai responded that if that's the case, Rin should save them, but Rin argued that she couldn't. Mai then told Rin not to say she'd forgotten, which confused Rin. Mai explained that she was haunting Rin to turn her into an idol, and it seemed Mai was changing form as she said she'd do this until Rin became a top idol. She also said she wouldn't leave Rin alone, moving closer to her, so Rin pleaded for her to wait. After that, Mai surrounded Rin, and Rin begged Mai to stop, saying it wasn't the time for that, and they needed to save everyone. In the next scene, a big explosion occurred, surprising everyone, and it seemed Rin's appearance had changed. Someone said, "That's what I'm telling you," and it was Mai, who stated that Rin could save everyone through song. We see Rin wearing a two-piece outfit, looking like an idol, with Mai as her microphone, which shocked Rin about her own appearance. Mai said they should cheer for Rin, and their cheers would give her strength. Rin asked why she was dressed like that, saying it was embarrassing, and begged Mai to change her back. Mai explained that the more people cheered, the prettier Rin's outfit would become, and that's what they needed to pump up Rin's fans. Rin insisted again that they needed to save everyone, so there was no time for singing. However, Mai said that if Rin didn't sing, she'd remain in that form forever, which shocked Rin. People cheered for her, with someone calling her Bikini Armor, so Rin was forced to sing, though she said she felt like she might throw up. Inside the cursed trunk, Turbo Granny was yelling "dumbass" and "scumbags," and we see her throwing a tantrum, saying she'd send Mai to hell. Okaroon took the Serpo phone and tried to talk to Rin, but he couldn't contact her. At that moment, a man saw something, saying that the world of the game was falling apart. Turbo Granny panicked, saying the seals were broken, which is why this was happening, while Rokuro was looking for work and Okaroon was asking what would happen. Turbo Granny answered that that world will get wiped out, including them. Because of this, Turbo Granny became angrier at Mai, and Okaroon pleaded for Rin to answer and to make Mai understand. Momo told Okaroon to calm down, and suddenly she heard someone call her name. Then everyone inside the cursed trunk started floating, but Momo was left behind. Momo was surprised by what she saw and held on to Okaroon, asking him what was happening. Zuma's classmates panicked, saying all sorts of things. Momo asked Turbo Granny if this was bad and if they would all disappear. Turbo Granny said she didn't know because it was weird and something was odd. At that moment, they heard someone singing, and Turbo Granny realized it was caused by the ombudsman. Outside the cursed trunk, people were crying at what they saw, and were shown that Rin was singing. Turbo Granny said the ombudsman was manipulating gravity, causing the figurines to float. Rin was amazed that the figurines were floating, and Mai explained to her that her singing was controlling gravity. Then, Mai said, "Let's really get things pumping." A man said he would make noise with his companion, and it was shown that they had a mobile DJ booth with large speakers in the back of a car. The DJ started playing music, and his companions sang along. So people cheered for them, and Rin joined in. Back inside the cursed trunk, Okaroon seemed unable to believe that Rin was singing using the ombudsman's power. Turbo Granny said it feels like Mai was stealing her thunder, and it makes her sick. Then, Okaroon asked if that was the case, then why is Momo the only one not floating? Because of what Okaroon said, Turbo Granny asked if Momo had eaten food from that world, which stunned Momo, because she had done so. Momo told Okaroon to let go, but he refused. Momo said that if Okaroon didn't let go, he would get stuck there too. Then, Okaroon handed the golden ball to Momo, saying he had changed form using it. So it was possible the curse wouldn't affect Momo, but Momo still didn't float. Turbo Granny said this was the fairy tale card's doing, and they needed to defeat it before the world of the cursed trunk completely collapsed. Suddenly, Turbo Granny jumped onto Momo's shoulder, saying she'd accompany her because luck was on her side. So Okaroon would be the one to defeat the fairy tale card. However, she reminded him that time in that world was different from real-life time. 1 hour outside was equivalent to several days inside. When Okaroon gets out, that's when the contest will begin, and the longer he takes, the closer it gets to bye-bye. Momo said Okaroon could do it, so he should blow away the fairy tale card. Momo and Okaroon stared at each other, and Momo let go, leaving only Okaroon holding on. Momo told Okaroon to hurry, and Okaroon said that even being away from Momo for a moment was difficult for him, and he confessed to Momo that he loved her. Momo couldn't believe what she heard, and Okarun added that he didn't want to let go of Momo. Because of this, Turbo Granny called him a bird brain, saying it wasn't the time for confessions, so Okarun should hurry up and defeat the fairy tale card. Rokuro seemed surprised that Okarun confessed, so he asked Momo how she felt, while the police officer asked what was happening. Rokuro also asked if it was thrilling, while the police officer asked if they would die if they flew up to the sky. So what should they do? Turbo Granny again hurried Okarun, and at that moment, Momo removed Okarun's hand from hers, causing him to float upwards completely. Okarun called out to Momo, and Momo shouted that Okarun could do it, and he should blow away the fairy tale card. Okarun swore he would do it, and Momo said Okarun could properly confess once they got out of there. Okarun replied that he understood and would do it, so Momo told him to swear it, and Okarun did. However, Momo wanted Okarun to say, "I swear it," and Okarun said it, but Momo made him repeat it, and he complied. In the next scene, we're shown the Brella boy, coughing up blood. So the fairy tale card told him to hang on because they were only a little further. He said he would finally be free, and he had waited so long for this. Then, one of Zuma's classmates appeared next to the Brella boy and called for his attention. He told him not to think he could escape, because once they got out, he would beat up the fairy tale card. The fairy tale card was surprised by this, so he asked what that meant and how the boy had flown there. Other classmates of Zuma followed, which surprised the fairy tale card even more. He couldn't believe how this was happening, and Zuma's classmates were taunting him in various ways. In the next scene, the boys emerged into the real world, and Rin stopped singing because of what she saw. She seemed shocked when Zuma came out, as he was covered in blood. The fairy tale card followed, saying how marvelous it was and how happy he was to be free. Rin told this to Mai, who said it was interrupting their performance. We also see Zuma's classmates tending to him, with one saying they should call an ambulance for Zuma. The fairy tale card said Zuma did well because he was free thanks to him. He said Zuma fought like a hero, so he wouldn't let his death be in vain. He added that he could hear the song of one who fights, the singing voices of those who feel anger, and said he had found the possessor of wondrous power. He was referring to Rin, and said she had the potential to destroy the world, and she had that capacity within her. The fairy tale card called Rin Jean, and asked her who would have thought she'd be in that place. He added that Rin should open her heart and mind, and let him see her true self. The fairy tale card had entered Rin's mind and was impersonating people from her life, such as her mother and grandmother. He also mimicked what they said to Rin, and surrounded her with his tendrils. Then, he spoke as Rin, saying things she used to think, like how she felt when she saw children playing and the pain she felt about it. We learned that Rin harbored deep anger from her past and wanted to destroy everything. Suddenly, the fairy tale card was flung towards a building, and he couldn't believe he couldn't possess Rin. Mai said she was the reason why the fairy tale card couldn't do that, and introduced herself as Rin's producer. She added that Rin wouldn't become a puppet that the fairy tale card could control. As Mai was saying this, people were cheering for Rin, saying she would sing. The fairy tale card called Rin a pretend do-gooder and told her to shut her mouth. After that, Rin's mouth disappeared, which shocked her, and Mai noticed it. The fairy tale card seemed to be taunting when he said it was too bad, and even if he couldn't control Rin's will, he could control other parts of her body. We returned to Okarun and the others, and the police officer asked if they hadn't gotten out of the cursed trunk yet, while Rokuro said that if he didn't get back soon, he'd be scolded by the store manager. Then, they suddenly stopped, and Okarun panicked because they were falling. The police officer said the singing had stopped, and Rokuro said it's bad, so he told them to hold on to him. Rokuro turned parts of his body into rocket boosters and a jetpack to lift Okarun and the police officer upwards. However, Rokuro exceeded his capacity, so he said he couldn't rise. Because of this, Officer Bega and Okarun panicked again, and they both cheered for Rokuro, but he told them to let go of him. In the next scene, Zuma's classmates attacked the fairy tale card, with one saying they should wreck him, while another said he was dead meat. The fairy tale card said they wouldn't do nothing of that kind, and he removed the eyes of those attacking him and ears for others. The eyes of Zuma's classmates changed appearance, a sign of the fairy tale card's mind control, and suddenly one whose eyes were removed was punched. Then, the students fought each other, and a large-bodied student tried to stop them, saying those still conscious should protect Rin, but he was mind-controlled too. He easily threw off his classmates and charged at Rin, but he was suddenly flung to the side by a mysterious force, which surprised Rin and the fairy tale card. We're then shown the talismans, which suddenly started flying around. A talisman stuck to a mind-controlled boy, and he suddenly stopped what he was doing. The talismans also hit other classmates of Zuma, and they were knocked out by the force of the impact. Rin saw someone arrive, and it was Count Saint-Germain, who knocked out those charging at Rin. The fairy tale card was surprised to see Count Saint-Germain, and so were Rin's companions, with Mai even asking if he was on their side. The fairy tale card said that what happened to Zuma's classmates was a sealing technique that temporarily stops movement, and that Count Saint-Germain is very knowledgeable, just as he suspected. He also added that the Brella boy sent by Count Saint-Germain to him was very useful. He also thanked Count Saint-Germain because he escaped thanks to him, so he asked why he was getting in his way. However, the Count Saint-Germain didn't seem to know him. The fairy tale card replied that Count Saint-Germain was that kind of person, the type he didn't want to befriend. He also took Count Saint-Germain's eyes, which shocked Rin. The fairy tale card laughed at Count Saint-Germain, saying that with such a face, he wouldn't be able to enjoy tea parties. Then, he attacked Count Saint-Germain with his tendrils, but Count Saint-Germain deflected them, which surprised the fairy tale card, as he had already taken his eyes. Count Saint-Germain brought out something that looked like needles and stuck them into the tsuba, or guard in English, of his katana. Then, he charged forward, using the power of the jumping crone yokai, which surprised the fairy tale card, and we can see Count Saint-Germain jumping in the air. He removed the first needle he had inserted and replaced it, allowing him to use the power of the black haircut yokai to cut the fairy tale card's mouth card in half. Because of this, Rin's mouth returned, and the mouth card gradually disappeared, but a new mouth card grew from one of the fairy tale card's tendrils, and Rin's mouth vanished again. The fairy tale card said that what Count Saint-Germain did was useless because no matter how many cards he cut, he could grow an endless supply of cards from the buds of his tendrils. The fairy tale card asked if Count Saint-Germain got it now, and attacked him again, but Count Saint-Germain inserted another needle into his katana's guard and used the power of the water tiger yokai. The fairy tale card attacked relentlessly with his tendrils, saying that Count Saint-Germain couldn't defeat him alone, even if he was the one and only Count Saint-Germain, who was avoiding the mind-controlled minions of the fairy tale card. He also said that Count Saint-Germain was truly a crafty fellow, as he had helped him escape the cursed trunk, disguised as Mr. Saint-Germain, but now he was attacking him. We learned that Count Saint-Germain was the one who took the golden ball from the police box, gave it to Zuma, and sent it inside the cursed trunk, so he asked why Count Saint-Germain was now trying to kill him. Count Saint-Germain said that fools are the same at any age, and people convinced of their victory become careless, and the careless expose their mistakes. The fairy tale card asked when he had exposed any of his mistakes, and retorted that it was Count Saint-Germain who exposed himself. He added that from the beginning, Count Saint-Germain's intention was to free and kill him, but he underestimated him. He said Count Saint-Germain fought him without preparation, and that would be the end of his luck. Count Saint-Germain said that the fairy tale card had mentioned earlier that he couldn't defeat him alone. Then he explained that Karuta cards were originally cards to read and cards to pick up, and 2 cards make a pair. He also pointed out that the monster's number of cards are even. So if he destroyed 2 at once, or all of them, the fairy tale card wouldn't be able to regenerate. The fairy tale card called him a fool and asked how such a thing would work, and if it were true, could Count Saint-Germain do it alone? He answered that he couldn't, and the fairy tale card said that's what he thought, so Count Saint-Germain couldn't defeat him. At that moment, Okarun, Rokuro, and Officer Bega suddenly arrived. They immediately saw the fairy tale card, who seemed angry at their arrival, and Rin was trying to say something. Count Saint-Germain said that with Okarun and the others, they could defeat the fairy tale card. The fairy tale card called the 4 of them cowards, and asked if they had no shame for ganging up to attack one person. While the fairy tale card was saying this, Okarun, the police officer, and Rokuro were running away in fear. Okarun said he had gone all out twice already, so he couldn't fight anymore. while the police officer was looking for Onii, prompting Rokuro to call them useless. Then, Count Saint-Germain called out to Okarun while running beside him, and Okarun seemed frightened, calling him a faceless monster. Count Saint-Germain suggested they work together, and Okarun asked who he was and how he knew his name. Count Saint-Germain replied that they could introduce themselves later, but Rokuro recognized him, shouting that he was Count Saint-Germain. Rokuro also asked what Count Saint-Germain was doing there, and Count Saint-Germain replied that he didn't know Rokuro, and they might have met at another time. While the two were talking, Okarun was looking for the class rep, who was waving at him amidst the fighting students. He was surprised when he saw what she was wearing, and the police officer was shocked when he saw Zuma lying on the ground. He approached him and told him to stay with him, asking if he was still breathing. However, Officer Bega seemed stunned, and we learned that Zuma was no longer breathing. The police officer said this couldn't be happening and told Zuma not to die on him. When the officer shouted Zuma's name, we're shown the sky, indicating that Zuma had passed away. In the next scene, we see Onii next to his brother, and they smiled at each other. Then, Onii seemed to notice something while Fuda ran away. Onii saw his parents and Fuda called him, saying goodbye, suggesting to us that Onii wasn't actually dead yet. His frown then turned into a smile and turned around. Then, we return to the present, and Zuma wakes up. At that moment, Officer Bega was giving him CPR, still trying to talk to him. Zuma told the officer to be quiet, saying he wouldn't die so easily. The officer was crying with joy that Zuma was alive, calling him a fool and saying they would go home. We moved to the battle, where a blast destroyed the fairy tale card's eye card, but of course, it regenerated a new card. We learned that Rokuro caused this, surprised at the fairy tale card's regeneration. Okarun said it was crazy and asked if there was no way to defeat it. Count Saint-Germain replied that to defeat the demonic fairy tale card, they needed to attack the paired cards at the same time. Then, he asked Okarun if he could use his power, which seemed to surprise him. Okarun couldn't believe that Count Saint-Germain knew about his power, and we're shown Momo inside the cursed trunk, shouting something. According to Okarun, this wasn't the time to think about that because they needed to defeat the fairy tale card. So he transformed, saying he didn't care what happened to his body because there was no time left. Okarun charged forward, and Count Saint-Germain said it was marvelous, wanting Okarun to attack the face card. He also ordered Rokuro to attack the eye card, and Rokuro asked about the hourly rate, to which Count Saint-Germain replied he'd think about it later. Count Saint-Germain added that he and Okarun would go first, and Rokuro should wait for his signal. The fairy tale card said it was unforgivable and called the three of them cowards and villains. In the next scene, someone says they'll join too, and they seem to be reaching for something spinning. It's Zuma, being helped to stand by Officer Bega. And the fairy tale card couldn't believe he was still alive, saying Zuma could help him, so they should leave temporarily. He said they would use Zuma's power, and the fairy tale card tried to possess him, but was surprised that he couldn't. He told Zuma to think about his mother, attempting to give him more anger, but Zuma countered, saying his mother tried to protect their family's life, so how could he hate a mother like that? At that moment, the fairy tale card became angry, wanting Zuma to hate his mother. Count Saint-Germain said the fairy tale card was trying to give them anger, divide them, and create conflict, so they shouldn't listen to it. He told everyone to attack simultaneously, and the fairy tale card shouted that they could all die, while attacking them with his tendrils. Okarun said that if it was for Momo, he could fight on, and we see them destroying the fairy tale card's cards simultaneously, with Okarun going all out again. Due to the attack by Okarun and the others, Zuma's classmates were freed from mind control, and the body parts removed by the fairy tale card returned. We also see that the fairy tale card is gone, with only something like electricity remaining, shooting off sparks. Count Saint-Germain, the delinquents, Zuma and Officer Bega, Okarun, and the others that fought the fairy tale card have won. Then, Okarun immediately looked for the class rep, but suddenly fell face down, saying he could not muster any strength, which worried the class rep, who asked if he was okay. Okarun said Rin needed to sing because someone is still inside the wicker basket. And that was Momo, which seemed to shock Rin. Inside the cursed trunk, Momo was kneeling, with only a little ground left for her to stand on, as the rest had disappeared and was disappearing. Momo and Turbo Granny were hugging each other, and Momo thanked Turbo Granny for staying with her. Turbo Granny replied that she wouldn't abandon something so precious to Seiko. Then, Momo's body started to disintegrate, and Turbo Granny panicked, saying to take Momo and let her live instead. Momo seemed annoyed by this and said it was the opposite of what Turbo Granny had just said, and that Turbo Granny's luck was utterly useless. Turbo Granny replied that it was Momo's fault for not controlling her hunger, so why should she be responsible for Momo's actions? At that moment, Momo suddenly floated, and they both realized that Okarun had defeated the demonic fairy tale card. However, Momo said she was still disintegrating, so Turbo Granny told Rin to hurry and sing with more soul. Then, Momo seemed surprised because Turbo Granny was growing larger, who also didn't know what was happening. Turbo Granny said it was weird, and Momo was hurt by her tight grip. She tried to calm Turbo Granny down, and it seemed they were close to getting out of the cursed trunk. The two did get out, and Okarun caught them, unable to believe how small Momo was. Momo couldn't believe her condition either, and Okarun was truly shocked. On the other hand, someone shouted, "What the hell is this?" And we see the fairy tale card in its depowered form, with someone telling it that it couldn't escape. It was Count Saint-Germain. The fairy tale card reminded Count Saint-Germain that they had a deal. If Count Saint-Germain got him out of the cursed trunk, he would lend him his power. Count Saint-Germain said that for this to happen, the fairy tale card needed to surrender to him and say the words, "I lose," so he could free it. The fairy tale card couldn't believe that Count Saint-Germain had fought him just to make him say those words. The fairy tale card said it, adding that at long last, he was free, and he was ready to accept every defeat for that. Then, suddenly, a small knife stabbed the fairy tale card, and it called Count Saint-Germain a filthy bastard swine. At that moment, Count Saint-Germain reminded him that they had an agreement, so he collected from the fairy tale card, while putting away his small knife. Count Saint-Germain had obtained the fairy tale card's powers, who said Count Saint-Germain couldn't escape what he'd done, so he ordered him to return his power. Count Saint-Germain said he wanted to know all the mysteries of that world and wanted everything for himself, including the power of yokai, because he was a collector of the paranormal. He added that if he had to choose, there was one thing very important to him, so he asked the fairy tale card if it was familiar with Dandadan. In the next scene, we're taken to a hospital, and a reporter is covering a brawl that occurred at the Rinjaku apartment complex. The incident reportedly started when hoodlums, who were using derelict buildings as hangouts, fought with students from nearby Rinjaka High School. More than 100 people were injured in this brawl, including Officer Bega and Zuma, as the brawl they're referring to was their fight against the fairy tale card. Bega asked why Zuma didn't tell him anything, and Zuma replied, asking if he meant about the cursed board game or his umbrella powers. Bega said it was about everything, and according to Zuma, Bega wouldn't have believed him, just like the detective who talked to them. We go back to the past, where Bega said that when he came home after working days straight, Zuma wasn't at home, and he found a weird old man instead. Back to the present, and Zuma explained that the old man had been trapped inside the board game since he was a child. The man had been stuck for a long time and knew nothing about the place, so Zuma let him stay at their home. Bega said Zuma should have at least told him, and that he could have called. Zuma said he went to the police box to tell Mr. Bazin, saying he'd be gone for a while. However, Bega said this was the first he'd heard of it, but he knew Zuma had been to the police box because of the lost and found record. Zuma realized it was because of the orb, and said he was told he could enter the board game because of it. So Bega asked who told him that, but Zuma couldn't seem to remember. He tried to recall who it was, and at that moment, the old man who had been stuck inside the cursed trunk arrived with Zuma's friends. The old man was asking Zuma for help because they had no one else to rely on, so Zuma calmed him down. One of Zuma's friends said they were there to visit him, and Zuma said they might disturb the other patients, so they shouldn't all come at once. We move to an all-you-can-eat restaurant called Goro Stamina Booster, where Seiko is treating everyone, saying her salary would be used up there. She's talking to the students who helped fight against the fairy tale card. Ira is there too, having someone try something, and it's Momo, whom they're treating like a doll. even getting her a dollhouse and doll friends. Momo is throwing a tantrum because she doesn't like her situation, and Ira seems to be teasing her, pretending to speak as a doll. Momo said she's getting annoyed, and Ira replied that she needs more calcium. Vamola is watching this and finds Momo cute. Of course, Seiko continues to tell everyone to eat to make her money worth it. We also learn that Gigi and Sakata are part of the meal, and Gigi asked why they didn't ask him for help. On the other hand, Sakata can't believe how small Momo is and asked why she doesn't go into the plastic models he made. Okarun said he needed to save Momo quickly and couldn't just stay calm, so he apologized. Then, Gigi called Momo and said that next time, Momo should promise to ask him for help, not just Okarun, which seemed to surprise Momo. Okarun heard this too, and he remembered holding Momo earlier and what Momo said about his confession. Ira added to what Gigi said, saying Momo should approach them for any paranormal activity. Sakata butted in and told her to come to the Great Kinta for help too, while Gigi pleaded, saying Momo is precious to him. Okarun looked shocked at what he heard, and Momo replied that she heard them, and what happened was an accident, so she promises to approach them next time. At that moment, someone said she couldn't add more troublemakers, which seemed to confuse Ira. We learned that it was Mai saying this, and Rin was trying to stop her, but Mai continued speaking, saying she and Rin were enough. Ira asked who she was and if she could stop pretending to be part of their group. Mai replied that was her line, and Ira called Mai a skank, saying she wasn't cute in any way. Mai said Ira was talking to herself with the word skank, and that Rin was 100 times cuter than her, but Rin pleaded not to be involved in the conversation. Gigi asked if Momo was hurt, and she replied no, that her wounds had healed, so she felt like $1,000,000. Then, Gigi asked Seiko if Momo would grow and how to return her to normal. Seiko said she didn't know, as it's a rule not to eat food from other worlds, which surprised Gigi and Okarun. Then, Seiko thanked Okarun, who didn't seem to understand why she was thanking him. Seiko said Okarun was the reason Momo got out, and they were lucky they managed to do it, so she was grateful to Okarun, who said he didn't do anything. Seiko also thanked Turbo Granny for accompanying Momo, but Turbo Granny ignored her because she was too busy eating. Okarun asked if Momo would stay like that forever, and Seiko replied that they couldn't let that happen, so she promises they'll find a way, no matter what. The group returned to Seiko's house, where she was smoking, and Turbo Granny was holding Okarun's family jewel, looking very nervous. We learn that this is because they're playing a game again to return Okarun's family jewel, and their game is baseball. They have different roles. Rin, Momo, and Ira are fans or spectators. Sakata is the photographer. Seiko is the batter. Gigi is the umpire. Vamola is the catcher. Turbo Granny is the pitcher, and Okarun serves as home base. Seiko says she owes Turbo Granny. While Gigi is nervous, Momo is cheering, Vamola is ready, and of course, Turbo Granny is calling someone a dummy. While they're all talking, Okarun asks if they can't return it like normal people. Momo teases Turbo Granny, saying she's nervous, and Vamola encourages Seiko to swing. Then, Ira tells Sakata to take a picture of Vamola, who looks very serious, and Sakata happily does so. Gigi says they should start, and Okarun agrees to let them do it. Turbo Granny says if Seiko thinks she can hit her big league pitch number 6, it won't happen, and she throws Okarun's family jewel. Seiko replies that she swung her bat many times before while doing this, and Okarun says it's crazy. Seiko goes all in to fight Turbo Granny's big league pitch, and we see the family jewel change direction. Seiko is surprised by this, and Turbo Granny calls her a fool, saying that wasn't her big league pitch number 6, but her Super ET curveball, which shocks Seiko. Turbo Granny adds that Seiko swung thinking it was a big league pitch, but that bat won't hit it. She said Seiko will never beat her, and Momo calls her grandmother, thinking about the crab prank Turbo Granny did when they last played. Because of this, she hits the ball, surprising everyone. The ball flies away, seemingly a home run by Seiko, which everyone can't believe. Seiko tells them to find it, and they search for it in the rice field. In the next scene, Okarun thanks them because both his family jewels have been returned. Gigi congratulates Okarun, and Momo is also very happy, while Okarun says they helped him a lot. The two grandmothers are there too, discussing how Seiko defeated Turbo Granny. Then, Momo told Okarun that this is great, but Okarun replied that nothing's great about it since Momo shrunk. He also apologizes and says he had promised, when Momo suddenly says it will be okay, and she's sure she'll return to normal. Ira says Momo is more adorable this way, so Momo tells her to be quiet and asks if she has nothing else to wear. Ira shows her small beauty products, but Momo doesn't like them. At that moment, Turbo Granny says Okarun needs to return something to her, and Momo asks what it is. Turbo Granny answers that it's her spiritual power, which seems to sadden the two. Gigi and Ira wonder about what Turbo Granny is saying, so Turbo Granny reminds them of their deal about finding Okarun's family jewel, and Ira asks if Okarun can no longer use Turbo Granny's power. She adds that they might be attacked by aliens or something again, and they'll be in trouble without Okarun's powers, but Okarun says he'll return it because it's a promise. Gigi can't believe Okarun will do this, and Ira says again that Okarun won't be able to do anything if something happens. Okarun thanks Turbo Granny for lending him her powers, saying it saved them, but Turbo Granny is in a hurry to get them back. In the next scene, Seiko brings out her giant fan for hitting, and Okarun sits down holding Turbo Granny, with his feet submerged in water. Seiko got ready, and everyone watches seriously. Seiko calls Okarun a bonehead while hitting him, and after a while, Turbo Granny jumps away from Okarun, and her powers gradually enter the Maneki Nico, alerting the whole group. Ira can't believe that's what the real Turbo Granny is like, and Gigi says the bloodlust is intense. Ira adds that Gigi should bring out the evil eye because Turbo Granny might attack them, but Turbo Granny didn't do that. Everyone is stunned, and Turbo Granny says Okarun has returned her powers, so she has no reason to stay. Then, we're shown various memories the group made with Turbo Granny, and she finally leaves as she waves goodbye.